The Art of Guerrilla Warfare SE, The Guerrilla, written by J.J. Tucker, narrated by Drama Simpson. Chapter 1, Fortitude. The guerrilla is a one-man army. When the odds become stacked in a manner that opposing forces seem unbeatable, when the sky itself seems to frown upon the less fortunate, there is only one sort of man who can put up resistance. There is only one sort of man who can fight back. He is one who can survive on his own, without hands to cradle him from danger, without a savior to deliver him from evil. The guerrilla makes his own way. He eats of his own fruit. His eyes never wander into another's bowl. His mind does not shatter at the thought of loneliness. His mind does not break in solitude. His shadow is his best friend. His imagination is his lover. His sword and shield are his family. Stillness does not drive him mad. Patience does not elude him. His mind strangles all desire to escape seclusion. The guerrilla can stand firm on his own. He does not wobble from strikes. Man alone cannot remove him from the earth. His feet are planted firm on the land. Against the fierce, he is immovable. Against seemingly indestructible obstacles, he is unstoppable. He can save his own life from his assailants. His first response is never a call for backup. His first response is to draw his weapon. The guerrilla defends himself first and explains his actions later, if necessary. He walks as if protected by an invisible shield. His safeguard is himself at all times. The guerrilla needs no assistance to move offensively. The lives of the enemy are his for the taking. No orders are needed for him to move. He needs no machine to wage war. He can cause chaos with a sharpened piece of wood. He can bring an empire to its knees with a razor's edge. The guerrilla has no choice but to be prepared to move as an individual. On the day of war, he will be isolated. The empire strikes all sides. Allies are untrustworthy. His brothers and sisters are just as impoverished as he is. He must always stand ready to fight his way out of the inevitable box enemies will create to trap him. When born with one's back against the wall, evolution is the only reasonable response to the environment. His nature is the result of man's evil. The world will undoubtedly stand back as they face annihilation at the hands of the empire. They will be the only ones to hear the cries of their children as fire rains down from the sky. They will be the ones stepping over the bodies of those who cannot be saved, those who cannot be granted a proper burial. Even their friends will not be able to rescue them. Fear will keep them at a distance. Assistance may arrive in the form of guns, bombs, and dollars, but no man will be sent in their defense. If allies do not face real danger, they will watch, they will wait, as people die. The world runs on different clocks when the guerrilla is at war. Every second is pivotal for those under siege, while outsiders have more than enough time for empty words of support and promises. The guerrilla must be able to stand alone because propaganda may isolate his cause. The empire may have the power to cast spells on the world. It may be gifted with the eyes and ears of the masses. It may own the microphone used on the world stage. Only its words may shape the minds of potential allies and supporters. It may be able to transform resistance to terror and crime. The guerrilla has to be able to fend for themselves to avoid betrayal and disappointment. A friend can become a foe, or simply fail to provide timely support. A relied-upon ally can meet sudden destruction without warning. External support is never guaranteed, so the guerrilla must be internally secure and strong. The guerrilla must always be prepared to lose their comrades in the first wave of the enemy's assault. It is always a possibility that one may be the lone survivor in their predicament. They must be of the mind that even if they have just one man left standing, the war is not over. There must be faith that one man can deliver a crippling strike against the empire if all else fails. The difference between a guerrilla and the average citizen is that the guerrilla does not fear the empire. They are not afraid to die at the hands of the enemy. The common man is unsuited to dance with the devil. He is taught to obey, to listen, to follow. He is trained to be agreeable, to never shine light on unproven theories. They must see victory before they agree to fight. They must see defeat before they agree to flee. Indeed, they fear punishment from the Empire. They fear losing their lives to the machine. But above all else, they fear being rejected by the same entity. So, they will not fight until they are forced to act. They will not take the initiative if they are allowed to live peacefully, even if the peace itself is a prison. This is the fear of the average man. The guerrilla knows no peace in the Empire's manufactured world. They find no serenity in being allowed to live. The guerrilla can accomplish tasks alone. They represent the underdog, the outnumbered, the outgunned. They are always one step away from the edge. When status is not a concern, one can fight without shame. Getting dirty is not an issue. Committing sins is of no concern. Nothing is beneath the underdog forced under the heel of oppressive forces. Criticism and judgment are meaningless when one's back is against the wall. There is a certain sort of freedom that comes with being outnumbered. The victories are sweeter. The losses are motivating. Like a traveler without possessions, the guerrilla is not bogged down by baggage. Their minds are free to roam to places the enemy cannot go. A massive force can resemble chains. Being attached to such a force can be limiting. Having inadequate access to resources can also be liberating. The have-nots are required to be creative in their struggle. They must be clever to survive, while the privileged and blessed only have to be obedient. The impoverished must think for themselves because all they have is themselves, whereas the fortunate are lost when they lose the advantage and the support of the machine. Having nothing to lose is a miracle when at odds with the Empire. There is nothing it can do to completely stop the guerrilla from fighting back. It can't take anything because they have nothing. It can't offer anything because they want nothing. Only victory matters. Being pushed to the edge makes concession impossible. There is nowhere to go but forward. Pushing back is the only option. There is no alternative. One must fight back, when surrender is suicide anyway. War only ends on the terms of those who refuse to give up. It is easier for those with the advantage to turn back, to give up on the objective. It is easier for those with something to lose to abort a mission. But the ones who cannot leave, cannot give up. The ones who are destined to die must leave the earth in style. They have strong minds. 90% of their success is due to their mental toughness. More is demanded from the mind than the body. Mental toughness is pushing through pain to achieve one's goals. Physical discipline starts first from the mind. The mind always breaks down before the body. The mind is strengthened through respect for order, submission to routine, and cleanliness. The ability to stay focused on one's mission comes through repetition and practice. Maintaining composure in the face of defeat, bodily harm, and death is the epitome of mental toughness. To push through physical pain to achieve goals, one must have a deep need or desire to defeat the enemy. The destruction of the enemy must drive every action of the guerrilla. They must eat, sleep, work, pray, and play, all for the purpose of being strong enough to destroy the Empire. They must accept their position to thrive on their need to win. They must hate their position to want to overcome the artillery of the enemy. Physical discipline is the beginning of mental toughness. Placing the body in situations where it is stretched to the limit braces the mind for war. To train the body physically is to prepare the mind to fight. One must practice feeling pain to deal with its unexpected arrival. Because man is a product of chaos, the mind naturally rebels against order. Free will and misunderstandings of freedom itself cause man to be an unhinged beast without structure. The practice of simple routines and rituals are the beginning of adherence to order. Keeping the self and surroundings in good order prepares the guerrilla to stand firm against the enemy. More is demanded from the mind than the body because the Empire threatens the body to defeat the mind. When that does not work, the Empire threatens the mind to paralyze the body. The mind of the guerrilla is tasked with creating and discovering unconventional tactics to defeat the empire. They have heart in situations where the average man loses spirit. To lose heart is to cave in to fear or fatigue. One can lose heart in the heat of battle or before fighting has even begun. Threats to the body can make a man surrender or refuse to set foot on the battlefield. Threats to others, whether they be loved ones, friends, or innocents, can rip the soul from the hearts of men. Being ill-equipped and surrounded by seemingly unbeatable enemies can destroy the spirit of the most decorated soldier. To have heart is to accept fear and push the body to its limits when in the face of an overwhelming force. The guerrilla has heart when dealing with the empire because he has no choice and wants no other option. Chapter 2. Mentality. Peace does not reside in their fantasies. Their minds are occupied with thoughts of when one must attack and when one must defend. Fantasies of peace keep men blind. They cannot see the fox in the bushes. They cannot see the wolf in the wilderness. They do not seek to strike before an injury is placed upon their people. They look only for rainbows in the sky and not warhawks. Most men do not bother to refine the elements of the mind that lie dormant. When they believe peace is a guaranteed right, they foolishly believe that other men are content if they are not opposed. Yet, the nature of man is war. Even in solitude, they make war against themselves. The existence of men should always suggest the potential for conflict, but the foolish see themselves in everyone. Fantasies of peace soften the resolve of men. It does not take much to make such men yield. They are pliable in negotiations. They are malleable in the hands of opponents. When they should be firm, they are flexible. Their hopes to avoid war make them spineless in every confrontation. Unearned, harmonious thoughts can make men complacent. Complacency makes men become exactly what their enemies want them to be, targets. They remain still when they should move. They move when they should remain still. They bargain when they should kill. They bring death upon themselves when they should be seeking out their foes. Complacency unlocks the gates of kingdoms and leads to the erosion of the most splendid of fighting forces. Fantasies of peace make men poor in mind and body. Such unrealities destroy ambition. Subordinates are robbed of their ingenuity. Superiors are fattened at the expense of hair-trigger thinking. Peace does not reside in the fantasies of the guerrilla because they are forced to see the world as it is at every turn. They experience the evil of men at an early age or at a time when other men have the option to immerse themselves in play. They are targeted by war machines and government plots before they are conceived. Their existence alone at times is the result of struggle. Their presence alone is at times only the consequence of the empire's failure or mercy. The guerrilla must always be ready to withstand new struggles, weapons, and attacks from the empire. War machines and complex social systems are built for the sole purpose of subduing them. National conferences are held to concoct schemes to oppress and destroy the most brilliant minds of their population. They cannot allow themselves to be fooled by the empire. To save ammunition and bombs, the empire attacks and subdues the mind. A fool cannot withstand such a mighty assault. Allowing their mind to waste away would be akin to waving a white flag at the mere hint of aggressive talk from the empire. The guerrilla must always expect trickery and manipulation from the other side. When it can, the empire employs millions simply to determine how to fool its prey. Dreams of peace make men easily breakable. All the empire needs is a few small cracks between the people for cities to fall in its hands. One who builds castles in the sky regarding peace with the empire is no guerrilla at all. He is simply a future casualty, whether in body or mind. The guerrilla may not always have the means to directly assault their enemy. Innovation keeps them alive. Fantasies of limits the ability to conjure up the wicked means needed to answer the brutality of the empire. With no hope for peace, the guerrilla has no qualms about making pawns plead for mercy as they are crushed to death under the heels of unique counteroffensives. All characteristics of the enemy are studied, its citizens, its pawns, its leaders. To study the enemy is to learn its history. The birth of the empire is a subject of importance to the guerrilla. It must be known where the invader came from in order to send them back. It must be known what contributed to its rise to determine what can influence its downfall. The empire's history before its contact with the guerrilla can tell the story of its motivation for aggression. If it came from poverty, then it is safe to assume that it comes for riches. If it rose through conquest, then one can predict it will come to conquer. Though negotiation is never ideal when dealing with the empire, knowing its proclivity in respect to diplomacy can determine if words can be used as a weapon against it, or if talk is meaningless and ineffective. If it has had contact with those similar to the guerrilla, the lessons from those interactions are of the utmost importance to the cause. Though every situation requires unique responses, the level of the empire's brutality on the battlefield can be predicted through study. The guerrilla can determine if civilians will be spared in the conflict or if they will be targeted as if they were uniformed men. Studying how its systems work can provide the means to defend as well as the means to counterattack. There are many systems other than its military that provide strength to the empire. Its education system supplies the thought processes to its citizens. When one understands the way a man thinks, one can determine how he can be deceived. The empire's political system determines what men strive for and what men will die for. Studying its politics can reveal how to deter the enemy before its first soldier is deployed. Studying the goals and ambitions of the empire can determine where it will strike and how it will strike. If its goal is to capture territory, it may not lay waste to cities it cannot afford to rebuild. If its goal is to teach those deemed impudent a lesson, one can expect to be pushed towards complete annihilation under its assault. In total, the purpose of studying the empire is to predict its behavior in war. Whether during peace talks or on the battlefield, the guerrilla must know who they are approaching to determine how to approach them. They must know who seeks their destruction to turn fate in the opposite direction. The empire's citizens are studied because they directly or indirectly allow their leaders to have authority over pawns. Citizens have the power, regardless of government structure, to prevent invasions and end occupations. Even under brutal dictatorships, the people can rise in defense of the others. Studying the leaders assigned to determine the mission of pawns provides the means to understand the empire's underlying objective. Though a vain leader may claim to deploy pawns in defense of his citizens, those who understand his mind know he seeks only glory. Disgracing him on the battlefield could put an end to his pursuits or provoke further hostilities. Knowing the man behind the troops provides the guerrilla strategic starting points in their journey to defend themselves and their homeland. Studying its pawns allow the guerrilla to understand how to repel them on the battlefield. Though covered in armor and armed to the teeth, pawns are men underneath it all. Knowing their fears and desires can lead to the discovery of ways to bring them down as with any other man on earth. They discover its weakness to avoid its strengths. When the empire's true capabilities are not known, it is allowed to play the long game, which is to its advantage, as long as it doesn't have to extend weapons, supplies, and men. It can save every bullet on hand for the future and create more for the same purpose. The empire can build its supplies for war by claiming such items are for civilian purposes. Allowing such growth is detrimental to the cause when the enemy finally decides to make a move. Infiltration and sabotage should be ceaseless, especially when the empire claims to be at peace with the world. Confusion regarding the status of the empire opens up the guerrilla to be mentally fooled over a long period of time. If it doesn't have to use physical, real-world tools to subdue the guerrilla, the empire can invest in psychological means to conquer the people. It can infiltrate their government, their educational system, their entertainment industry. It can intertwine itself in their food industry. It can gain a foothold in their systems used to obtain natural resources necessary for survival and wealth. Not only can the empire build up its resources when its true status is unknown, it can steal, siphon, or cause the guerrilla to expend their own resources unnecessarily over a long period of time. Through false peace agreements, the empire can weasel its way into industries it has no business being involved in. It can create dire situations where the guerrilla is dependent on its cooperation for survival. Any attempts to break away would be detrimental to its prey. By the time its true aims are realized, the guerrilla could be in no position to impact the empire with any sort of assault. Weapons, supplies, and men may be wasted if attempts to push the empire out were initiated only after it has inserted itself in their economy, society, and overall everyday life. When the empire feigns weakness, or is assumed to be weak, it can slowly but surely place its forces in a position to attack the guerrilla. Under the guise of friendship, business, humanitarian aid, or simply neutrality, the empire can slowly creep over the border of its prey. By the time its true aims are realized, there is no way to push them back without a major struggle. Though surprise attacks are especially effective on the side of prey, when the empire is not viewed in its true form, when its true nature is ignored, surprise attacks from the powerful are extremely ruinous to the unprepared. The guerrilla must always be in a position to know the empire's true weakness. This knowledge prevents them from missing opportunities for swift victories. Missing such openings can trap them in a frozen conflict, a situation that gives the superior force the advantage. Complacency may cause the people to believe the empire is strong in places where it is not. Such assumptions lead to a loss of support in some segments of the population. They may believe that negotiation is preferable to self-defense. Such a mentality may lead to the surrender in places that could have been easily defended. Such a mentality may lead to defeat of well-trained guerrilla forces at the hands of paper tigers. Such a mentality may lead to the doubt of predictions that come to fruition. A guerrilla is the bullet from a sniper that strikes the head of an emperor. A guerrilla is the knife of an assassin that slits the throat of a commander. A big difference can be achieved by a seemingly insignificant actor. One speech from a leader can galvanize men to take back stolen territory. One highly motivated and properly placed rebel can take out a battalion. One civilian can inspire outsiders to provide assistance. One act of resistance can rally the people against oppression and occupation. One guerrilla can achieve a kill that halts all commands on the battlefield. One artist can paint a picture that inspires millions to fight back. In guerrilla warfare, it is indeed the thought that counts. Chapter 3. Polarity. Because of its size, the empire must be out in the open. It may attempt to use guerrilla tactics to destabilize its prey, though such actions may cause confusion in the eyes of observers as to the identity of the culprits. It does not protect the empire from the guerrilla. Obviously, the size of the empire can make it a dominating force, yet, clearly, size alone does not make an empire an empire. If it cannot defend the massive amount of land it owns, or manage the vast number of troops under its control, it is nothing more than a nation with a lot of viable targets. A small nation with advanced weaponry can easily fit such bloated game in its crosshairs. A nation's history can magnify its presence on the world stage. The past is a currency that established nations respect. Even if nations have been enemies for centuries, they may have more respect for one another than a new entrant to the global game. An entity that may upset the world order may be more of a threat than a familiar foe. One knows what to expect from a nemesis, while an unknown combatant would be full of unexpected surprises. Though many confuse history and culture, culture alone provides different advantages on the world stage. A nation with a rich culture is very influential and could earn enough respect globally to raise it to the rank of empire. History reflects the actions and accomplishments of a nation, while culture represents the behavior of a people. Therefore, a nation can have a notable history in terms of conquests and achievements, yet if its people are backwards, its culture will be looked down upon. A rich culture, however, invites alliances and trade that can turn a small settlement into a hub of wealth and influence. Whether through military significance, historical prominence, or cultural currency, a small nation with undeniable influence can inflate itself so much that it seems to be the size of an empire with large territory under its control. An influential empire usually cannot hide behind the scenes if it wants to remain powerful, though covert means of influence could possibly be effective if there are whispers about its power that do not have to be publicly confirmed. Its boldness can determine the size of an empire. If a small country is willing to take risks that others are not, it can be deemed equivalent to a large empire. Nations which deem every loss of life a tragedy cannot afford to lose 100 men in a day. A state that is willing to lose 100 men to simply prove a point is a dangerous entity to confront. Prey are deemed prey, usually based on the size of their homeland in comparison to the empire. Insufficient technology also impacts their predicament. The guerrilla could possess large swaths of land, perhaps even an entire continent, but due to their lack of technology or advanced weaponry, they cannot compete directly against an empire. Therefore, size is relevant, yet irrelevant when it comes to land, if one cannot defend it against direct onslaughts of violence. A history of losses can deem a nation as prey. If no changes have occurred since such losses, the global community will not respect the capabilities of such a nation. The world finds it easy to use one's track record against them. No one bothers to do the research. So, if one was weak in the past and they do not have the means to prove themselves in the present, they will be viewed as weak in the future. Such a situation affects alliances and the boldness of potential intruders. Those with a culture deemed underdeveloped or inferior by the standards determined by empires are viewed as prey by the determiners and those subservient to the opinions of the determiners. Though prey may see value in their culture, it does not matter on the world stage. The agreed-upon superior cultures collectively disregard any meaning or significance in what they value. States that want to be accepted by those they have accepted as above them also join in neglecting the value of prey. Though some outsiders may find value in their culture, the status quo is to look down upon them, which limits their ability to gain useful alliances, engage in beneficial trade, and build generational wealth. Of course, without land or the capability to defend land, and without established or respected history and culture, great influence is hard to come by. So, prey find themselves as prey partially because they have little or no way to influence the world. This is especially true during times of peace. It is only during turmoil that the world may look upon them and see their struggle, and perhaps rise in their defense. Their inability to influence other states prior to becoming engaged in a conflict with the empire is one of the very reasons they find themselves involved in a conflict with the empire. Those without the audacity to lose their lives in defense of their nation make themselves prey. Cowardice may not always be the reason for such inactivity. It may seem foolish to the majority of a population to risk suicide to defend land. It may seem irrational to die for culture to some. Survival may be placed above such intangible notions by some people, and these people may believe that such an act is an act of intelligence. However, empire sees such behavior as weak, and this lack of boldness on the part of prey makes them targets. The empire attempts to use guerrilla tactics by employing individuals, small teams, or groups to achieve mission objectives. Usually, the units are elite or well-trained, but they do not have to be. The less connected such groups or individuals are to the empire, the more room is left for plausible deniability or reasonable doubt as to whom is to be held responsible for their activities. The empire also uses the common guerrilla tactic of concealment to commit war crimes against its enemies and its own people. Of course, when forces of the empire do not identify themselves when committing crimes or acts of terror, the empire cannot be prosecuted, let alone convicted of any wrongdoing. While the guerrilla uses concealment to protect lives, the empire uses the tactic to devastate the people with even more brutality behind the scenes than it does publicly. While misdirection is a common conventional military strategy, the guerrilla usually cannot succeed without employing it. The empire must be led astray at all times to protect the people, on and off the battlefield. When the empire employs the tactic, it is never done unselfishly. It utilizes the tactic to massacre its prey, even though they are already at a disadvantage in direct combat. It misdirects its own people to hide its true ambitions, when such ambitions have nothing to do with their well-being. Sabotage and assassinations are also two tactics that empires tend to employ. While such tactics are a necessity for the survival of the cause, it reeks of desperation or seems highly immoral when applied by the empire. Already at a disadvantage, prey suffer greatly under sabotage. The assassination of influential guerrilla leaders cuts deeply in the ranks of fighters. Though there are no rules in war, such actions by the empire ensure it loses the moral high ground in front of an unbiased audience. The empire's use of guerrilla tactics can confuse most civilians, many of its opponents, and members of its own regime. However, nothing the empire actually does can ever protect it from the guerrilla. Fooling the guerrilla on the battlefield through misdirection or concealment does not prevent the guerrilla from fooling its officers. Sending a small team to assassinate a guerrilla does not stop the guerrilla from sending a small team to assassinate one of its generals or government officials. Though, for propaganda purposes and to display its reach, such activity is beneficial to the empire. However, the benefits of such measures pale in comparison to when they are employed by prey. The opportunities to assault an empire are immense. It has no choice but to remain still from time to time, whereas the guerrilla cannot stop. When engaged in combat, the empire must remain still at times to resupply. The heat of battle may be so intense that the planned supply schedule may not coincide with needs in reality. The empire may need a complete pause in battle, or pauses in certain segments of the battle, to prevent retreat from held territory or other forms of defeat. The empire may need to suspend movement to regroup and plan its next offensive. Even if things are going well, a ceasefire may be a necessary step to ensure success continues. When things become disastrous, taking the time to regroup does not remain optional. It becomes critical. The empire's troops need rest, or they will mutiny, fail, or surrender. Whether drafted or voluntarily enlisted, the empire's troops chose to join its ranks. When conscripted, they could have fled or refused to fight. Those who joined voluntarily did so of their free will. Men who have the option to fight must be given rest, or they will grow resentful. Resentful men have all the time in the world to regret their decisions, even with the enemy at their heels. If they do not mutiny, they will fail to complete their mission due to being distracted by their unhappiness, or they will surrender at the first sign of mercy from the enemy. The empire may have to pause combat for political reasons. Unlike the guerrilla, it has to play to reluctant audiences at home and abroad. Its actions have to resemble those of a play. Its story has to be a movie to be appealing to the world. Invading another country is frowned upon, no matter the reason. The world prefers diplomacy to such acts. Therefore, if the story the empire attempts to sell to the world is full of holes, it may need time to alter the script before re-engaging its enemy. The guerrilla cannot stop because the empire is always plotting against them and targeting them. The guerrilla is always on the move to avoid conspiracies and crosshairs. The empire that lives to conquer and conquers to live thrives on oppressing its prey. So, generally speaking, it cannot stop pursuing their demise. Their blood fuels the empire's economy. Their blood stimulates its political discourse. The guerrilla must always be expecting attacks, whether such attacks be physical, mental, or spiritual. Of course, the empire desires to break their bodies and take their lives, but it also seeks to dominate them in the mental and spiritual realm to ensure it can control them before death. Such action is done for a variety of reasons. The empire may seek to mentally control a people to enslave them or break their spirit for the same purpose. The effects of such dominance become apparent on the battlefield if done correctly. The mentally and spiritually broken are more susceptible to surrender or flee. Acts that save the empire supplies, weapons, and men. Training is the best defense against mental and spiritual incursions. During times of peace, during times of war, during ceasefires, the guerrilla should always be training. One can never overtrain when facing a superior force. Training must be done to counter both the expected and the unexpected. All scenarios must be considered because invaders will do anything to avoid the embarrassment of defeat. The empire is never honest about its true capabilities, so, through reason and educated guessing, the guerrilla must imagine everything humanly possible from the enemy and prepare for it daily. Not only must the guerrilla constantly be concerned about how the empire will get them, they must continually consider the ways in which they can get the empire. They must consider ways to retaliate against the empire as well as ways to initiate violence against them. When they strike first or respond to an injury, the guerrilla is always the defender. When at war with the empire, defense is never ending. That is, unless the invader chooses to leave or is forced out. Rest is a luxury to the guerrilla. It is a necessity to the empire. Even in a dictatorship or authoritarian regime, the strength of the empire lies in the military. The military is the power behind the ruler or rulers. When dissatisfied, the military always has the muscle needed for a regime change. With this in mind, they should not be overworked. They must be given leave. They must be given rest to keep them satisfied. Forces led by intelligent generals know their power. They will not let the empire misuse them. They will protest, revolt, or desert if they are overburdened. Such forces are most likely to take control of the government if pushed too far. Forces led by fools do not know their power, or are forced to ignore it. They allow themselves to be used up and tossed to the side when the empire achieves its goals. Though they may be perfect puppets, only an idiotic empire would dare put fools in charge of its forces if victory is the goal. Men classified as fools lack the strategic competency needed to win on the battlefield. However, if the empire's forces are simply cannon fodder, then a fool is the perfect choice to lead them on the ground. They can all be thrown at the enemy without recess. Men led by those loyal to the empire or its rulers dare not protest or revolt. They can be isolated and removed discreetly or publicly. There is no cohesion regarding dissatisfaction in such an environment because the need to be loyal to the empire is constantly drilled throughout the ranks. No one truly knows who to trust regarding their displeasure. Complaints could be met with discipline or worse. But overall, regardless of who leads the men on the ground, the empire usually allows its men rest to protect itself from mutiny and to ensure that they have the energy needed to win on the battlefield. The guerrilla starves for rest because they must keep moving no matter what. They must stay hungry for rest because, at best, there are at least 2 men on the other side waiting to counter their resistance. They must be able to contend with at least 2 well-rested enemies at any given moment. While the empire can divide its men into day shifts and night shifts, the guerrilla must be prepared to fight all day. If there is ever time to rest, that could be a sign that something has gone awry or something is coming. The guerrilla must be sure of all things before even contemplating laying his head down on a pillow. They thrive on attacking the enemy while it sleeps. It is possible for a foe to sleep with their eyes open and die in the same manner. To sleep is to be unprepared when there was plenty of time to organize. To sleep is to be complacent where there was just cause for worry. To sleep is to allow oneself to become distracted by things unrelated to war when in the middle of war. Men die with open eyes when they know an attack is imminent, but they cannot retreat due to orders. Men die with open eyes when they know an attack is looming, but they cannot retreat because there is no escape. Men die with open eyes when they know an attack is pending, but they refuse to retreat due to pride or arrogance. Men die with open eyes when they know the enemy is approaching, but they do not retreat due to misleading intelligence. Men die with open eyes when the enemy is drawing near, but they are too ill-equipped and out of shape to properly respond. Even blinking presents a risk when going to war against them. To blink is to have doubt when one should be sure. To blink is to have doubt and ignore it. To blink is to have doubt and not investigate it. To blink is to move at the wrong pace. To blink is to lose focus on the mission or task at hand. To blink is to give in to laziness and procrastination. In order to catch an enemy off guard, one must never be off guard. To kill a man while he slumbers, an assassin must have dry eyes. To have dry eyes is to be merciless, to not spare an enemy. To have dry eyes is to be heartless, to be brutal, even when unnecessary. To have dry eyes is to be cold, to have no regrets about doing evil against the opposition. To have dry eyes is to be soulless, to leave the gods, religions, and superstitions behind. To have dry eyes is to accept the role of being a slaughterer of men. Chapter 4. Perseverance. The ability to persevere is an inherent trait in every guerrilla. Perseverance is moving forward in the face of adversity. It is refusing to yield when the devil himself is sent by God to take you with him. It is pushing towards gun turrets as if one were bulletproof. It is running towards death with a cocky grin. Perseverance is stepping over the bodies of comrades to continue the assault against their killers. It is never surrendering to their murderers, even when captured. It is seeking revenge for their souls at all costs. Perseverance is charging the enemy on the battlefield after losing one's home to bombardment. It is making them pay for their disrespect. It is lying in wait to make them feel their hypocrisy when given the chance to put flames to their homes. Perseverance is continuing the fight after the enemy has taken loved ones. It is keeping their memory alive with every enemy casualty claimed. It is thriving on getting close enough to the enemy to capture them, then torturing them to gain a sliver of justice. Perseverance is continuing the fight against the Empire after multiple defeats. The average man may give up on his dreams after one loss. Those who persevere do not view a trouncing as a reason to give up. Defeat is a reason to get better, a reason to improve, a reason to become even more brutal. There are times mourning has to be neglected. There are times when there is no choice but to leave the bodies of brothers and sisters behind. There are times when thoughts of delivering the news to families of fallen ones must be delayed to continue the fight. In war, vengeful men must be able to close their eyes and disregard the cruelty innocents faced at the hands of the enemy until the time for retribution presents itself. Perseverance is moving forward, yet holding back. It is delicately balancing madness and patience. When the guerrilla faces defeat after defeat after defeat, they must continue. Even if they lose the war, they have to continue. Their duty is to fight off the enemy to the last man. The only other option is slavery or death under the Empire. They have to keep going, even when death is certain. Even in death, they may be able to strike the enemy. So if they must die for a chance to do so, so be it. To withstand the fists of the enemy, the face cannot be fragile. When dealing with the hard-headed, one must be accommodating. Withstanding the fists of the enemy is witnessing the destruction of cities and still continuing to fight. It is to realizing that there is no more sunshine, no more walks in the park, until the invader is removed from the land. It is accepting the loss of tens of thousands of fighters and civilians within months, when it cannot be prevented. It is knowing the only cure for the heartache that accompanies such failure is revenge. Withstanding the fists of the enemy is pushing forward under bombardments of trauma. The difference between the guerrilla and the Empire when it invades their land is that the guerrilla has no reinforcements, while the Empire can continually pour in pawns across the border. While the Empire can send fresh bodies and minds into the conflict, the guerrilla must endure its onslaught with the same men from day one, given that they survive. The mental toll war takes on men is often ignored until wars come to an end. How can the same man endure being constantly shelled, bombed, and shot at day after day for weeks, months, or years? It is not possible for one's mind to go unaffected after enduring serious trauma, regardless of what sort of man one might be or what sort of training one may have undergone to prepare for war. Withstanding the fists of the enemy is maintaining one's mental fortitude until victory or death. A face that shows weakness has difficulty withstanding the fists of the enemy. Though it is considered propaganda, lies must be told to keep the people in the fight. Leaders cannot show the toll the empire has taken on them upon their faces. They must be able to smile and lie about their success on the battlefield in order to gain success on the battlefield. The people search for encouragement when constantly battered by the empire. The men on the front lines may not be able to put their lives on the line if they can see defeat in the eyes of superiors. The empire is hard-headed because it physically goes forward like a machine. It is an unstoppable force, but that isn't necessarily a good thing. It is politically rigid. It cannot change course. Every time it alters its plans, it admits defeat on the world stage. When it says it's going to do something, it has to do it. It does not have the luxury of being versatile like the guerrilla. The guerrilla accommodates the enemy using diplomacy and violence. Accommodation through diplomacy is luring the empire to the negotiation table when conditions are favorable. It is using allies to hurt the empire politically and economically when conditions are unfavorable. Accommodation through violence is sidestepping the empire's direct attacks and bashing its head in from the side or the back. It is letting the enemy hang themselves by their own rope. It is brutally capitalizing on their mistakes. The ruthless lead the enemy by the hand and butcher them when they least expect it. The empire is soft enough to be led by the hand because it can be led astray due to politics. It cares about the respect it has on the world stage because such respect helps protect its borders from incursion. Any disrespect to its stature must receive some sort of response. This makes the empire predictable in some aspects. In war, being able to predict the moves of the enemy is the most beneficial skill to possess. The empire is soft enough to be led by the hand because it can be led astray by economic issues. The empire cannot allow itself to become impoverished. It thrives on being able to use its financial institutions to dominate prey. Threats to its treasury can cause it to withdraw, if not completely, then just enough for the guerrilla to take a few good pot shots. The empire is soft enough to be led by the hand because its power is centralized. Even if it seems decentralized, there are a few individuals or groups that ultimately call the shots. Though it can have the capability to make quick decisions within its established bureaucracy, nothing beats the decentralized system that every guerrilla is forced to adhere to. Every guerrilla is motivated to do the same thing: defeat the empire at all costs. Pawns have individual concerns, such as their careers, reputation, and income. They have to wait for commands to ensure they do not lose what they have or jeopardize the potential to get what they want. The guerrilla can exploit the empire's need for respect by being as disrespectful as it possibly can. When backed by a powerful ally or allies, this can be especially effective. The empire has to act to save face, or it has to lie to its people regarding why it has to tolerate such insolence from its prey. The guerrilla can exploit the empire's need for money by sabotaging its economy or using allies to do so. Though money is valuable to the guerrilla, they have to find a way to succeed with or without it, whereas the empire depends on its riches to move. If it sustains enough damage to its economy, it has no option but to halt its advance. The guerrilla can exploit the empire's centralized system simply by moving faster than its decision-making machine. The empire cannot truly trust the people it puts in charge on the ground, regardless of how it seems. There are checks and balances put in place to prevent errors and mutiny. These hindrances to quick action are taken into account when planning to destabilize the empire in and out of the trenches. They pray to meet the enemy, while the enemy prays for an extended nap. As the Empire takes its time planning and maneuvering, the guerrilla's only task is to find and kill its pawns. Each day the guerrilla goes without a kill is a day the invaders take steps on land they should be buried under. When the Empire is present on their land or has intentions to destroy their people, civilians are not safe. The guerrilla has to take the initiative under such circumstances. Even if they have to take the fight to the enemy, the Empire cannot be allowed to freely threaten its people without consequence. It is usually in the best interest of the Empire to stall. Each day it remains on captured territory is a victory for its side. Though, at times, ceasefires may benefit the cause by providing a little breathing room, they can also give the Empire too much time to regroup and resupply. Nevertheless, it is in the best interest of the guerrilla to lull the enemy to sleep. It is in their best interest to make the opposition complacent and unprepared to be murdered. Chapter 5. Self-sufficiency. Conventional armies criticize their unorthodox techniques. Conventional armies are forces that are recognized by the international community. They are recognized as legitimate organizations at global and regional conferences. They are allowed to discuss issues affecting the world. In some instances, they are allowed to vote on matters that impact the status quo of the world order. Conventional armies are recognized as such, first and foremost, due to their nation's relationship with other nations. Whether they possess superior or inferior forces, if a nation agrees to play by the rules established by the majority of nations, their forces are deemed conventional. They abide by rules that determine the sorts of weapons and resources they can use in war, as well as how to treat civilians and prisoners of war. Once they agree to play by the established rules and are accepted by the global community, a nation can enter battlefield contests with the world's approval. The history of a nation alone can legitimize its forces. If it has historically fought fairly, as defined by the collection of nations in charge of defining what is fair, then a nation's forces can be deemed conventional. However, this designation does not protect it in the future if it falls out of favor with the global community. When labeled a rogue or terrorist state, it doesn't matter what fighting style a nation uses. It loses its ability to interact with other nations legitimately, and its forces are targeted for depletion. Armies that do not agree to fight fair can still be designated as conventional armies and face consequences for being unprincipled. Empires usually have armies that are designated as conventional. This is because empires are usually so big that they cannot hide their superior strength. They have too many weapons, vehicles, and other resources to play coy with the world. Most developed nations have armies that can be considered conventional. If a nation is plugged into the global economy landscape, it usually has a conventional army to protect it from invaders or its own people. Armies of underdeveloped nations are considered conventional when trained by empires. Such armies are restrained by the rules and regulations of their masters. They are obliged to follow their rules of engagement to receive financial support and resources. If they decide to go rogue, they may find themselves in economic ruin, or worse, invaded by mysterious forces supplied with weapons from covert sources. The definition of conventional is something that is socially accepted. Therefore, forces that engage in conventional warfare are socially accepted entities that engage in socially accepted activities. Conventional armies are socially accepted because they are defined by the majority of the most powerful nations on Earth. They create reality, regardless of the tactics used by a nation's forces. They determine who belongs to the club and who does not. They have the combined military power to make most dissenters comply. The consequences of disobeying the established order are usually not worth the benefits of doing so. A nation may break the rules to invade an enemy, only to find their land targeted as a consequence. If their land is not targeted, a dissenter's access to resources and trade could suffer. If they do not play by the rules of the global order, sanctions, embargoes, and other restrictions are used to make them pay dearly. There are many activities considered socially acceptable in war when done by the favored that would not be acceptable if done by the unfavored. An unfavored party could be a nation that has gone against the economic interests of the majority, or a nation that has supplied groups designated as terrorists with aid. As long as massacring civilians is done by a nation in good standing, and as long as the nation offers apologies or excuses afterwards, they are allowed to kill as many civilians as they please. Civilians killed are always tallied as collateral damage and not a tragedy, if the party responsible for their deaths is a part of the global in-crowd. Propaganda and lies are socially acceptable tools conventional armies can use legally. Their governments and news organizations are allowed to openly lie about situations on the battlefield and the intentions or motivations of opposing groups. They can create false stories and narratives that have no relation to the truth whatsoever. When propaganda or lies are exposed, the offender can simply acknowledge the mistake, and all is well. Theft of land, resources, and people is socially acceptable when done by conventional armies. Crimes miraculously become justifiable acts during war, when you're on the right side. Theft of land is considered an act done for security purposes or retribution for the crimes of a belligerent nation. Theft of resources is deemed a way to cut off the war machine of an evil state. The capture and relocation of people is either done to protect pawns, steal resources, or ensure enemies do not receive aid and comfort in their midst. Even acts of torture are deemed socially acceptable if committed by the right side. It is madness to believe that slaughtering thousands of non-combatants in the process of waging war is socially acceptable. Indiscriminately killing civilians is madness because the tables can turn on any nation on earth any time. A nation with great manpower can suddenly find its population dwindling due to a variety of reasons. Disease could wipe out men of fighting age at an alarming rate where they are needed most. Other situations, such as decreases in childbirths and immigration, can cause a nation to lose its fighting force, opening it up for attack and retaliation for its abuse of others in the past. Nature could look upon a nation unfavorably and cause such destruction that a military force cannot be maintained. In such an event, the nation would need assistance from its neighbors and other countries, but due to its disrespect of human life in the past, it may find itself abandoned by the global community and left to starve to death. The discovery or invention of new technology useful in war by nations previously mistreated could reset the global order in favor of the oppressed. There would be no reason for the newly crowned superior nation to spare its former persecutors. The world would most likely feel no guilt for allowing the nation to exact its revenge upon its nemesis. The hypocrisy fuels the cause. Seeing that no outside help may come, they are self-reliant in their fight against the oppressor. The fear of a military response usually stops outside help from assisting a nation under attack from a conventional army. No one wants to meddle if it puts their nation at risk. The first fear is retaliation from the belligerent. However, if they are too preoccupied with their prey, then the fear of their allies exacting revenge on the meddler is a worry. The meddler's own enemies could use the situation to launch an attack, and since the meddler placed themselves in a conflict that was not necessarily their issue, no one may come to their aid. Nations that may have no issue bearing the consequences of supporting a country under attack by a conventional force may lack the military power to even get involved. Lacking the forces to both wage war and protect their homeland is usually what prevents most nations from providing direct military support. Global and regional treaties also keep outsiders from interfering in a conflict. Those involved in such pacts fear losing money and resources. Treaties may prevent nations with common ground from coming to each other's aid when attacked. The global order compels the guerrilla to rely on their own manpower to force invaders from their lands. If they rely on other fighters, especially from nations involved in global pacts, they might as well hand over their land to them as payment. To avoid being indebted to outsiders, the guerrilla relies on their own weapons and resources, first and foremost. If they lack what is needed, they must be able to reasonably source what is needed without becoming a puppet or proxy. The perfect guerrilla is completely independent. They do not even depend on their own brothers and sisters in arms. They live on borrowed time at war against the empire. Lives may be lost that were expected to be pivotal in the completion of a mission. Entire units could be wiped out in hours. Decentralization ensures the fight against the enemy continues whether they are a united force or dispersed across the planet. No mission is carried out without multiple contingency plans. Contingency plans are always needed for a myriad of reasons. Because members of the cause can be captured or killed at any moment, contingency plans are necessary to make up for their possible absence. Initial plans can be exposed by traitors or spies. Well-placed technology can reveal plans. Archaic means of plotting missions may be necessary to ensure secrecy. Contingency plans are also needed for guerrillas working with allies to defend their nation. Allies can turn their back on the cause any day without consequence. The guerrilla must always be ready for such disappointment. Losing important battles or multiple battles can change the entire landscape of a war. Though it is always prudent to stay hopeful, the guerrilla must prepare for the occasion in which they fail to achieve every single one of their objectives. There must be a contingency plan ready to be executed if all else fails. Such a plan ensures that no matter what happens, the cause has the ability to make the empire pay for its aggression. Chapter 6. Paradoxicality. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. All civilians are potential guerrillas. When the empire comes, the people become like monsters that reveal their true form under the moonlight. Because no one is safe from its threat, everyone must become a threat. Everyone becomes a soldier. Those who call themselves fighters in times of peace hide their skills to avoid capture, but they do not hide from the fight. Those who hunt game for survival or leisure hide their weapons to avoid confiscation, but they do not hide from the killing fields. Professionals utilize their talents to support the cause. Teachers alter their curriculums to prepare minds for the front line. Doctors and nurses ready themselves to serve patients under gunfire and explosions. Police officers increase their radius of responsibility as they are tasked with countering external threats in addition to domestic ones. Those employed in the water, heating, and electrical industry stand by to protect and repair critical infrastructure that are targets of the empire's cruelty. Intellectuals from all career fields give their minds to those in command of the resistance. They are tasked with assisting and strategizing against the overwhelming force that seeks their destruction. The mind is indeed a terrible thing to waste when the empire comes to invade. To overlook those who may not be the best with rifles, yet experts in the fields of science, would be a foolish decision by any nation under attack. Advancements in weaponry and solutions to strategic dilemmas come from the minds of such men and women. Other than professional soldiers, all guerrillas keep themselves hidden as the empire approaches. When the empire presents its fabrications as reason for the conflict, they listen, they watch, they prepare, they wait. When it launches its invasion, they hide, they organize, they strike. When the empire occupies their lands, they survive, they divide, they terrorize. When the empire believes it is victorious, they attack, they destroy, they kill. Though their own governments fear them, it would be foolish to remove them from the populace. Their own governments fear the guerrilla because they are always dissatisfied. Because they are always ready to fight, they make no qualms about seeking perfection in leadership and government. They do not fear speaking up or engaging in protest. The fact that they know how to fight scares the powers that be. They are the ones who will fight back if the government ever oversteps boundaries. They see men as men, regardless of their rank or position in society. If a man abuses his power, the man deserves to fall. Their own governments are apprehensive about the guerrilla because they are influential, but they do not want power. They can motivate the masses to action in a way the government cannot. For the most part, lying to the people is unnecessary. All they have to do is reveal the truth to get the people on their side. The guerrilla cannot truly be controlled, not by outsiders and neither by their own government. If the rules do not suit the people, they find ways around them. If the laws themselves are corrupt, they find ways to undermine their enforcement. Unlike the general populace, they cannot be fooled or manipulated. Unlike the average person, they keep an eye on domestic and foreign affairs. They do not allow themselves to be lulled to sleep by everyday life. They are ready for war at a moment's notice, and they always know why they must fight. Their governments need the guerrilla because they can never find satisfaction living under the rule of an invader. It goes against every fabric of their being to submit to such a ruler. They serve as a useful force of resistance, even if their ideologies differ from the country's acceptable philosophies. To discard them would decrease the nation's ability to defend itself. To be a slave is not in their nature. Death is the better option for the guerrilla. Taking the enemy with them is the preferred choice when forced to choose between a life of slavery and perishing at the hands of the oppressor. They know how to fight. They won't hesitate to kill. They are needed to defend the nation if it is targeted by a superior foe. Though it may possess a conventional army, the Empire's prey needs ruthless guerrillas standing by in case the military collapses. Without outside assistance, it is highly likely that prey will fall at the slightest push. When this occurs, the men unafraid of death, unafraid to murder, unafraid to do evil are the government's best hope in pushing back the Empire. The guerrilla does not want power, but they will fight the Empire to return their nation to the government of the people. This makes them useful in the times of war. In a sense, this makes them more trustworthy than the military itself, which may be filled with disaffected officers who crave power for themselves. The true guerrilla doesn't fight to make himself a king, he fights to ensure his people are free. The Empire can control the guerrilla to an even lesser degree than their own government. They can be trusted to never surrender and keep the resistance going for decades and even centuries. When properly supplied, they can create never-ending havoc for the invader and all other threats to the region. The difference between a guerrilla and a pawn is that one conceives what they are fighting for, the other is told. One pursues the tortoise, the other chases a cheetah. One is homeless, the other is stricken with homesickness. The guerrilla controls their own destiny because they determine what they are fighting for. When enlisted in the military, it is due to their own choice. When conscripted, they remain in control of their purpose. The guerrilla will fight in defense of his land and his property, as they are the pillars of every man's life. It doesn't matter if the threat to his estate comes from foreign or domestic threats. All threats to his assets are acceptable targets. When they fight for freedom, they fight to be able to choose their own destiny. They fight for the life they envision. They do not for the rosy picture painted by their governments or recruiters. The guerrilla fights to be free from the yoke of other men. They are averse to being enslaved, whether such slavery is done through physical or mental means. They were born free, and they will fight to die in the same manner. Even when slavery itself is not a threat, the guerrilla will fight to ensure their rights are granted without foolishness or deception. They are not comfortable living in a world of inequality, whether that be for themselves or for their brothers and sisters. They have no issue killing to gain the respect they are owed. The most dangerous guerrilla is one whose destiny comes under threat from violence and oppression. The only recourse they have is to greet those who threaten them with bloodshed, torture, and slow deaths. Their destiny is one of their most prized possessions. Any man who interferes with their fate generally forfeits their own life. They will not be spared if captured. The Empire controls the destiny of its pawns because it determines what they fight for. It decides their fate from birth. Their path is narrow. They cannot veer off course, even if they wanted to. They are destined to be used as cannon fodder if the state determines that is their purpose. The value of their lives fluctuates based on the requirements of the Empire. Their freedom is defined by the Empire. They are limited in what they can say and do, yet they may foolishly believe they are not. They only realize the error of their ways when they are on their knees, moments away from meeting the guillotine. Overall, The rights of a pawn are tied to their loyalty to the empire. However, there is inequality no matter what a pawn does. If they are not of the majority, their voice is muted. They are only good for being tossed against the enemy or commanding others to be tossed against the enemy. That is the destiny of a pawn. Threats of imprisonment, poverty, or execution are used to control pawns. If they do not fulfill their duties, the pawn is worthless to the empire. The system is set up to eat them alive if they dare revolt against their purpose. The pawn depends on the direction of the empire. The guerrilla carries his own compass. Pawns are lost without the empire because they are dependent upon the lifestyle they are taught to accept. They are taught what it is to be free by their masters. They are left unrestrained so long as they do not go against the grain. They are barred from thinking and acting outside of the boxes created by the empire. Pawns are dependent upon the resources provided by the empire. By destabilizing other nations around the world, the empire is able to provide first-world amenities to its citizens. If pawns wanted to escape their prison, there are not many places to go that offer the quality of life the empire provides. The places that offer the lifestyle pawns are accustomed to may not accept them due to their background. Pawns are dependent on the empire for protection from domestic threats. The empire creates strife between citizens and puts the pawn in a position to be targeted by the disgruntled. They depend on the empire for weapons and rights that allow them to defend themselves from the people they swore to protect. Pawns depend on the empire for protection from foreign threats. Once they swear an oath to defend the empire from external threats, the pawn creates millions of enemies for themselves. They represent the boot of the empire that steps on the necks of the weak, poor, and undeserving. They are more likely to be targeted for attacks than the well-protected rulers of the empire. They are forced to depend on the structure created by the empire that ties all pawns together for protection. If they leave the safety of their network, they are on their own. The enemy will not spare them. Pawns are dependent upon the empire because they have been sheltered from the outside world. They have been encouraged to be illiterate and uneducated in matters other than those that have to do with the defense of the empire. When disillusioned, their life seems meaningless. When their disappointment leads to poverty, their days seem pointless. When their love for the empire disappears, they believe they are nothing. The guerrilla always knows their destination because, unlike the pawn, they are not dependent on the lifestyle granted by their nation. They are versatile, capable of adapting in any environment. Whether blessed with riches or cursed with poverty, the guerrilla has the mentality to survive under any condition. They do not allow themselves to be swayed by the present. All things change. The guerrilla is not forced to follow any path because they are not completely dependent on the resources provided by their nation. They can survive with very little or improvise to fulfill their needs. Basic provisions are enough. Basic shelter is enough. Freedom of movement is enough. They understand nothing is owed to them but the air they breathe, whereas the pawn falls for false promises and self-destructs when they are abandoned. As long as their right to defend themselves is not infringed by the government, the guerrilla needs no direction in dealing with domestic threats. Though support from the government is helpful in such situations, it is not necessary. They depend on themselves to defend themselves. When necessary, they can launch offensives against foreign threats. That is the nature of the guerrilla. They do not need the government to defend the nation from the enemy. Their knowledge of the outside world grants them autonomy to leave everything behind if necessary, whether to protect their homeland from the empire or abandon it due to its own government's corruption. The guerrilla is not forced to endure imprisonment of any form. They can always find a way to escape, even if the only route is through death. The empire makes the pawn disposable. The guerrilla makes himself replaceable. Every pawn has to be in uniform. If a pawn does not fit in the system, they are removed or forced to remove themselves from service. Their behavior has to be uniform. Their mannerisms, their walk, their talk has to be acceptable to the empire. Pawns are thoroughly immersed in the culture. They are expected to reflect its values through action. Even if they exceed military standards and requirements, if they do not behave properly, they are ostracized, regardless of their talents. Pawns think the way their masters want them to think to avoid being scrapped. Whether politically or spiritually, a pawn must worship who the empire says they should worship. Pawns feel the way the empire wants them to feel. If they are required to accept abuse, whether they like it or do not like it, they must bear with it. Their feelings do not matter if they do not line up with the sentiments of the empire. The empire only allows the pawn to take actions that match its agenda. They are not encouraged to act with compassion. They are promoted for acting with brutality. They are not encouraged to act with humility. They are publicized for being brash. The empire needs barbarians on its side because they can easily be lobbied against its enemies like mindless grenades. Because the guerrilla makes himself replaceable, this allows for diversity. Diversity allows the job to be done by anyone. It doesn't matter if one does not fit into the majority. Anyone willing to fight back against the empire is valuable. Appearance doesn't matter when the invader sees all citizens as prey. The guerrilla teaches and encourages behavior that can lead to ousting the empire. The unruly are made captains in the struggle. Cowardly actions are discouraged. Those who collaborate with the empire are made acceptable targets. The guerrilla instills thought that can lead to ousting the empire. The rebellious mind is encouraged. A mentality of unrestrained violence is supported when it is directed towards the intruder. The guerrilla supports direct action that can lead to expelling the empire. The people are encouraged to act with benevolence towards one another to ensure they are united against the empire. They are emboldened to act with viciousness towards the empire because that is what they will receive from the war machine, and that is what will cause the war machine to malfunction. An empire sets fire to an entire region in the hopes of killing one man. The crosshairs of a guerrilla are set upon one man to take one life. The empire aims for mass casualties because it is blind. It cannot see what it wants to see. It wants to see the men and women who are a threat to its power, but because the guerrilla can blend into the crowd and the environment, it cannot. Though this protects the guerrilla, it causes the empire to swing wildly at the populace. But this is the way it must be. If the empire had the power to pick the most resilient rebels from within the crowd, the people would stand no chance against its onslaught. It would be able to move against its prey with impunity. The empire kills without discretion to turn the population against the guerrilla. It believes that it can turn the people against themselves by terrorizing them, yet such a tactic rarely works. Because it is the aggressor, most of the populace find no reason to believe that submission will bring an end to their torment. In fact, to surrender would trap them in the clutches of the aggressor and give it even more leverage to abuse them. To keep the guerrilla preoccupied with providing aid, the empire attacks civilians. When civilian areas are attacked or damaged, first responders and defenders have to address their needs. This lessens the support available to the front line. Though their main objective is pushing out the empire, the guerrilla is responsible for protecting civilians when they can. When they are put in a position where they have to defend civilians, they must do it. To sacrifice the people when they have the power to save them weakens the cause. The empire is well aware of the predicament it can create, so it threatens civilians when it needs to distract, provoke, or punish the cause. When civilians are attacked, the guerrilla is forced to expend resources meant for the battlefield. Instead of fortifying military bases and sourcing weapons, they must maintain hospitals and medical supplies for the injured. They must obtain coffins and find locations to bury the deceased. The guerrilla focuses on killing those deemed worthy of death. They are not blind. They cannot be. They must see the world as it is at all times. They can see that heavily civilian casualties alone cannot defeat the empire. They perceive reaching the hearts and minds of the enemy's civilians as the best way to affect them. They fight for self-preservation as defined in their own eyes. The guerrilla must provide their own definition of self-preservation because if they let outsiders define their cause, they risk being enslaved. Whether they claim to be allies or enemies, outsiders can cause the guerrilla's territory to be carved up in ways that are not satisfactory to the movement. Therefore, the guerrilla determines their own boundaries and red lines. Aside from losing territory, the guerrilla could find themselves financially enslaved if they failed to determine their objective. Accepting assistance to fight off the empire may leave the nation to becoming heavily indebted to its competitors. When peace is achieved, the mighty lenders come to collect. If resistance to compliance is carried out by the indebted, force or manipulation is used to gain compliance. If outsiders only agree to provide aid if the guerrilla submits and obeys, then they trade the potential for physical slavery and death for guaranteed mental and spiritual bondage. Chapter 7. Hunger. It is not impossible for a guerrilla and an empire to be after the same objective. The empire always has a set of objectives in mind when it decides to attack others or defend itself. The end goal is always to feed itself or prevent itself from drifting close to the realm of starvation, even if such a possibility is hundreds of years away. The empire must be viewed as holy by its people and a death trap to its enemies. There can be no wiggle room. Enemies cannot be allowed to live at its borders. They must comply with all of its demands or die. No matter where they dwell on the planet Earth, the empire is always obligated to protect its citizens. Though there may be times where they are sacrificed, it is more beneficial for the empire to protect them. The people may find themselves in locations that are coincidentally prime targets for the machine. In these situations, they provide the excuse for invasion. An impoverished empire doesn't stand a chance in the world of predators and prey. A detrimental economic forecast provides no other option but war, whether that be with or without arms. The empire must do whatever it takes to avoid destitution. Becoming a laughingstock is only a minor consequence of such a situation. Death will surely arrive for those who cannot afford to provide for the people, even in meager ways. The people themselves will be subjected to slavery, either directly or indirectly, if they are deemed a nation of vagrants. To the empire, its sovereignty is its key to the domain of respected nations. Without this key, it will be struck whenever and wherever it is weak. Without this key, its own people will strike from within. Its sovereignty is what grants its authority over the people. It is what mesmerizes the masses and turns their sons into combat drones willing to die to keep the empire alive. The empire will move to defend or support an ally. It only does so if there is a potential to eat from its ally's plate. Without the potential for a free or profitable meal, the empire will offer excuses for not providing assistance. It will invalidate treaties if there is no likelihood of receiving proper payment. At times, the priorities of the empire and the guerrilla align. Both sides often want the same things, but in different ways. The guerrilla usually does not take offensive or defensive measures unless their territory is under attack or threat. They have nowhere else to go. If they allow the empire to take or destroy their homeland, they become tenants of the oppressor, or worse, lowly itinerants in the land of their birth. What man would allow himself to be dispossessed of the earth where the bodies of his ancestors are buried? The guerrilla cannot allow their brothers and sisters to be murdered without answer, just as the empire cannot allow the deaths of its citizens to go unpunished. Though they may lack the same reach as the empire, the guerrilla must ensure that their people are avenged, regardless of the cost. Time is of the essence. However, it truly doesn't matter how long it takes to get vengeance, as long as vengeance is served and those who feel their wrath know why they are being injured or killed. Though poverty does not completely threaten their survival, the guerrilla cannot allow their riches to be taken without just compensation. They cannot allow their economy to be ruined for the benefit of outsiders. They must defend their treasury to remain competitive in the world of men. The guerrilla must be able to provide for their people, because that is their duty, to protect and serve their brothers and sisters. They cannot allow the space for the empire to be capable of coercing their citizens with mere bread. The guerrilla must guard their autonomy in the same manner as the empire. It allows them to have a voice on the world stage. If their independence is prevented, stolen, or unrecognized, they are worthless. Though they are prey, if they can be heard, they can prevent most incursions by verbal protest. Regardless of size, no nation respects puppets or hostages of others, no matter what is said in public. To garner respect on the world stage, the guerrilla must remain free. The guerrilla must defend the interests of their allies. This must not just be done out of the goodness of their hearts. The interests of their allies must align with their security requirements. If their ally is under attack, they must provide support. If they cannot provide direct support, the guerrilla subverts and disrupts their common enemy by any means. The rebel is hardened by the wilderness. The guard is accustomed to the warmth of the palace. The wilderness is the world without laws, the world of war, the world where children are sent to die over the pride of old men, the world where young men fight to defend the lives and freedoms of the ungrateful. The wilderness is the home of the desperate man, the home of the man without a choice, the home of the man who must fight or allow himself to be enslaved or killed. The man of the wilderness is comfortable with paranoia. Their entire existence faces threats from outside forces even in times of peace. The arrival of the enemy is always expected, even when it is clear they will not come. The mind of such a man is already damaged. No threats can alter their frame of mind. No form of attack can shock them or place them in awe. The threat of poverty or its arrival is meaningless to those accustomed to the wilderness. Those who have lived without do not fear living with nothing. Those who have prepared themselves for the aftermath of the end of the world do not fear living in a wasteland. They will fight as the world crumbles around them. They will pull their enemy down into the same hell it hopes to inflict upon their people. The one who prepares themselves to survive in the wilderness is accustomed to lacking resources. Living off the land is natural to him. Depending on the environment is second nature to him. He accepts hunger pangs in the same way he accepts air. He is accustomed to going without. In fact, he practices starving himself of the comforts, pleasures, and delicacies of civilization. During wartime, he does not surrender his nature simply because the world around him has changed. He cannot be tempted to submit by offers of peace in the form of worldly goods and sensualities. He makes use of the environment the enemy takes for granted. He becomes the trees they see as lifeless. He becomes the trustworthy ground beneath their feet. The guerrilla has extensive experience living under constant assaults to their mind and spirit. The wilderness of manipulation, lies, and propaganda is an environment they have been forced to endure for years, if not centuries. They can spot dog whistles blind men cannot see. They do not react to provocations concocted to lead them into traps. The palace is the world of law and order, the world of peace and comfort, the world where children are sheltered, spoiled, and protected, the world blessed by luck, thievery, or mass murder, the world where young men are raised to continue the traditions of their forefathers and defend their institutions with indiscriminate violence. The palace is the home of the glutton, the home of the greedy, privileged man, the home of the man who doesn't have to fight, but does so to conquer and take from others. The children of the palace trust the image of the world, painted by their guardians and ancestors. They expect victory and success in every circumstance, with little to no effort on their end. Their minds are not accustomed to being imprisoned. They cannot survive the torture of enslavement. They can easily be mentally broken by brutality. They are soft and edible, even when externally hard. The threat of chaos unnerves and worries them. They have nightmares of their neighborhoods being overtaken by the criminal-minded. They fear robberies by robbers who do not know they exist. They fear being raped by predators unattracted to their temptations. They fantasize of being heroes in their dystopian nightmares. They arm themselves and prepare to dominate the weak, yet they cower and surrender in the presence of equals and superiors. They believe they are destined for heaven, even when they oppress, rob, and murder the innocent. Men of the palace are surrounded with abundance. They are accustomed to having what they need always on hand. They are accustomed to having what they want delivered to them immediately, sometimes within seconds of their request. They rarely have to make direct demands for their desires to be fulfilled. Their world is built to serve their every want and need. They are befuddled in environments that fail to meet their expectations. When those of the palace wage war, they are well supplied with everything necessary for victory against a weaker opponent. They plan to never go a day without a meal when at war. They plan to have every tool and supply necessary for survival during a conflict. They plan to possess every weapon needed to make their enemies submit. A beautiful day can always be planned, but the weather cannot always be predicted. The men of the palace plan to storm the homes of their enemies, yet they cannot prepare for the storms unable to be forecasted that may cause their downfall. Those of the palace are used to being catered to through lies. They are manipulated into believing they have the God-given right to oppress anyone in the way of their beliefs. They are deceived to gain the possessions of others for their rulers. They are lied to about their history and the histories of others to drive them like cattle onto battlefields they have no business setting foot upon. They are not immune to propaganda. They are raised to swallow it from the hands that feed them without protest. They are uplifted by the lie spewed by their superiors and rulers. The son of a gorilla knows his father's killer. The son of a pawn wanders in the dark. The gorilla knows himself because he has to. If he does not know who he is, the enemy will paint his portrait. The enemy will control his destiny if he cannot see his own reflection. He lives in a world where his very existence is threatened and attacked. He exists in environments that the empire tries to use against him. His shortcomings are constantly sought after and exploited in efforts to defeat him. He knows why the enemy fears him. He knows why he is only offered violence and death. He knows why the voices of the powerful speak against him. They are threatened by those who feel threatened by their existence. Their natural power cannot be earned through deception. Their natural strength cannot be stolen, so they are threatened to doubt their ability to destroy the oppressor. The gorilla knows why their foe brutally assaults them. They know why it is relentless in its cause to eradicate them from the planet. They know why the opposition cannot rest without capturing them. Their freedom sickens those who cannot survive naturally on Earth. The enemy's need for excessive assistance drives it to envy the gorilla's ilk. It wants to rid the earth of those whom it cannot replicate. It wants to eliminate those blessed by nature to roam the earth freely. It wants to take the lands, lives, and property away from the rightful owners to secure its unstable position on earth. The rebel understands the reality of their environment. They know where they belong and where they can blend in. They are familiar with the entrances to mental prisons and delusions. They must be aware at all times because the empire concocts false realities to entrap them. They must understand what the collective thinks, while the collective must only obey orders. While the collective must accept the lies regarding their reflection, the gorilla must know their own weaknesses. They must know before the enemy knows, or because the enemy knows. They must know their history to understand their position in the present, to be able to reverse their misfortune and prevent further calamity. The gorilla cannot dwell in ignorance of himself if he wants to be victorious. He must know the position of every mole and abnormality that may lead to his destruction. The pawn does not know himself because the empire needs him to be blind. It prefers him to only know what is necessary to feed and advance the machine. He does not have to think for himself. All the pawn has to do is submit to the powerful or the system that keeps the powerful in control. His destiny is not concrete. He is what the empire says he is. He becomes what the empire wants him to become. The pawn's reflection depends on the mission of the empire. He is a warrior when he is needed to conquer the weak. He is servant when he is required to obey. Pawns do not truly know why their enemies are their enemies. They fight to make lies a reality. They die to make rich men richer. They are brainwashed to believe that under all circumstances they are the good guys and their enemies are simply bad guys. They are like children playing a game with rules created by men who do not truly care about their survival, men who only care about their existence as tools to help push their agendas forward. They are sent to capture things that are a mystery to them. They are sent to kill strangers without question. In reality, the pawn never truly knows why they are sent to invade an enemy. They are encouraged to kill with lies. They are encouraged to oppress others through deception. They are indeed like toy soldiers, wound up to follow whatever path their masters direct them to follow. The pawn barely knows the reality of their own environment. It is rare that they understand that of the guerrilla as thoroughly as the natives. They are lost in the wilderness, regardless of the sort of intel they capture. Due to the safeguards provided within the palace, they expect the world to catch them when they lose their footing. They foolishly expect locals to assist them in the subjugation of their own nation. They believe they are invincible when they can easily be killed, like any other man. Pawns are manipulated into believing they have no shortcomings, or that their enemies are incapable of discovering and taking advantage of their shortcomings. They are deceived into running headfirst onto front lines to gauge their opponent's capabilities and resolve. They are fools. The revolutionary longs to burn the gates of the empire and storm its capital city. While heavily engaged with the enemy at home, the guerrilla cannot spend much time directly attacking the empire's territory. They may be able to hit several targets of significance. However, they cannot truly damage their opponent's kingdom without severe consequences. Usually, the empire attempts to leave some portions of its conquered opponents intact for capture. However, it may completely annihilate the enemy without consideration of global backlash if pushed too far, even if it initiated the conflict. The empire could take vengeance on civilians, prisoners of war, or other victims if provoked in the wrong manner. As a conventional force, it may hold back just enough to get away with most of its crimes for political purposes and to avoid inciting responses from competitors it has not prepared to face. But if its prey actually hits where it hurts, the empire will not hesitate to carpet bomb the defenseless. It will not hesitate to commit genocide against the vulnerable. It will not hesitate to increase the deaths of children. Wounding a man in the knee with your last bullet is pointless if he still has the capacity to shoot you in the face 100 times. Attacking the empire's home may cause the guerrilla to lose their political standing if the activity is not approved by the global community, or at least if it is not approved by those in control of the global community. The invasion of the enemy must be pushed back into the depths of hell before any design can be made on its realm. If the guerrilla must venture into the lands of the empire, it cannot do so with a knife pressed against their throat. Their sudden movement may be the long-awaited reason the enemy desperately needs to gain approval from competitors and neutral nations to finally unleash true hell on its prey without consequence. Even if their opponent is forced to fall back, the guerrilla also needs room to fall back if its endeavors abroad do not go as planned. A proper base of operations to launch attacks, refuel, resupply, and train is needed to assault the empire. This base of operations does not necessarily have to be a physical one, but the cause has to be united in its attacks against the empire because all will face retribution. It is necessary to avoid casualties on multiple fronts. Losing men at home and abroad is bad for morale and weakens the cause. The guerrilla must concentrate its forces and focus to successfully hit its kingdom in a meaningful way, or the strike on the empire is worthless. Above all else, when the decision to act with aggression behind enemy lines is chosen, the tragedy of falling into a trap must be avoided. Chapter 8. Sacrifices. Sins do not exist on the battlefield, especially when the side representing the heavens holds the advantage and refuses to turn back or compromise. Sins are the lines that separate humanity from demonism. When these lines are crossed, man is transformed from a product of nature to a spawn of hell. Prayers are made to the ground instead of the sky. Evil is worshipped by those expected to be honorable. Destruction of men is venerated. Conversations of peace are despised. Sins are violations of laws made to keep the peace. When violation of these laws is made acceptable, chaos becomes the norm. Rape, robbery, and murder become a daily part of life. There are no civilians, only attackers, defenders, and victims. Man is truly in the wild under lawlessness. Sins are violations of unspoken rules that promote harmony. The desire of every man of sound mind on the ground is order and peace. With access to necessary resources and without the provocations of the powerful, man does his best to be at peace with his neighbor. Embroiled in conflict, man is influenced to act with insolence and disrespect at the sight of his neighbor. Minor encroachments become precursors to violence. Sins do not matter on the battlefield because the use of evil methods is necessary to cast away demons. Men of evil come to murder, enslave, and cause misery to others. There is no reasoning with such men. They only respond to the same brutality they are sent to inflict on the innocent. They must face the same fate as those they are sent to capture or kill to remind them of their own fragility. When men cross the seas to violate basic human rights, only the wicked can endure living in the mental abyss necessary to defend life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The force required to push back demons does not come from kind-heartedness, benevolence, and consideration for others. Humanity must be sacrificed to become a defender of the people. In war, there is no harmony other than that of the combined forces of brothers in arms. There is no mercy other than that reserved for the mistake of one's brothers. There is no love other than the love for one's comrades, rifles, and bombs. There is no joy other than the joy of seeking the look of shock on the enemy's corpse. There is no peace until the enemy meets defeat, devastation, or death. Once they cross the border, time ceases to exist. Only one future becomes the goal, the future where the guerrilla triumphs over the empire. No other world ensures their freedom. No other universe ensures their survival. The guerrilla does not lose composure at the sight of tragedies. They cannot. Even when doing wrong, they must make others believe they are right. If they accept the role as the villain, their own people will turn against them. Calmness of the hand is needed to fire a shot. The heart and the mind guide the sword of a soldier. The soul must be non-existent, or at peace with murder, to pursue victory. The psyche must be prepared to deal with the sight of obliterated enemies scattered across the battlefield. Though anger is a good motivational tool to recruit members to the cause, its use on the battlefield should be controlled. Uncontrolled anger interferes with strategy and tactics on all levels. Anger is good for justifying the why, but it is self-defeating when formulating and implementing the how. Satisfying one's desires must be put aside at times to successfully complete the mission and completely win the war. Depression in the midst of war is a disease. It destroys initiative and distracts men from their objectives. It is inevitable, but it must be dealt with immediately to avoid confusion. A man incapable of escaping his despair could forget the identity of his enemy. His blurred vision could turn him against his own brethren. He must be treated with care and given the space to rediscover his passion to kill the adversary. He must be repaired. No part of any war machine should be forced into service without addressing malfunctions. Such breakdowns are infectious. Fear is also transmissible, though fear in and of itself is normal and necessary in the heart of any fighter. If it is not managed properly, it becomes self-destructive. A man of war cannot hesitate. He cannot be unsure. He must act when it is time to act. Any delay can lead to the deaths of hundreds, thousands, or even millions of men. The guerrilla cannot accept being cast as the villain because the weaknesses of the cause will be exploited. The weak are always looking for a reason to surrender. They do not want to fight, and they do not want to risk their lives. They have no desire to participate in the defense of the nation. They do not want to be victimized by the oppressor, and they do not have faith in those who put their lives on the line to protect them. The cowardly are always looking for a reason to make concessions. They believe themselves clairvoyants. They believe the cause is pointless. They believe it is better to give in and be spared than to be completely free from tyranny. They would rather be allowed to breathe than to risk everything to be free from oppression. Unfortunately, such men are in every populace. Their concerns must be addressed, especially if they have the power to influence the people. The strong are not immune to being convinced to turn against the guerrilla. They can fall into the class of the uncertain, the men and women unsure of the possibility of victory, those always looking to forfeit due to their inability to envision success. Like the feeble and the fearful, the support of the strong can be siphoned with nightmares of annihilation. The indifferent and apathetic only respond to matters that personally affect their lives. They will support the guerrilla if such support protects or provides for them. They will betray the guerrilla if backing the cause makes them a target or jeopardizes what they hold dear. A noble cause makes an enemy's citizens question their state's agenda. When the cause is just, the servants of the opposition cannot ignore it. They are brainwashed into believing they are on the side of good. They believe they support the good guys. They believe their murderers and rapists are heroes. Exposing the truth to the masses cuts the legs from under their troops. Lies cannot achieve what the truth can ensure. The truth cannot be ignored by any man under the rule of government. No one completely trusts their rulers or government. Only a fool would truly trust their fate to others without checks and balances in place. When those checks and balances are exposed as fraudulent, the people cannot accept the mistreatment of others by their government. To accept such injustice would invite the same treatment to their own populace. There are disaffected, jealous, greedy, and power-hungry members of every society who can spread dissent to the uncertain, the distrustful, the weak, and the stupid. The guerrilla can take advantage of this aspect of society by presenting a relatable cause that is digestible to the average citizen. The enemies of the empire who dwell within their lands are excellent allies. They can recruit those who can be turned against the empire to the side of the cause. Domestic enemies of the state are likely to show compassion for the cause when the unnecessary brutality of the empire is exposed, witnessed, or revealed. The hearts and minds of the enemy's people are won by showing the atrocities their nation commits. They must see the unfiltered evil with their own eyes. It must be raw and unpure. Any edits to the truth will give them excuses to reject it. The desire to manipulate their viewpoint with commentary must be muted. They must be able to trust their own senses when the truth is revealed to them. They would be fools to deny their own eyes and ears. They would be the perfect fools for their government if they still denied the truth when it is right in their faces. Their rulers or government must be exposed as frauds to get them to support or sympathize with the cause. No citizen wants to see their troops die on the battlefield to enrich and feed fraudulent men. It is a disgusting affair to any person with a functioning brain. The prestige and comfort that comes from political power is not meant for liars and deceivers. The people do not willingly approve of such people holding the reins of their nation. Allies within the enemy's lands must be given the necessary information to use against their internal adversaries to help displace the empire's regime and defeat its pawns on the battlefield. Truth is ideal, but if all else fails, lies can be provided if they can successfully disrupt the enemy's plans. Care must be taken to cover up the origin of the lies, as any dishonesty from the cause will be used by the empire to justify its brutality against the people. Humans can fake happiness with a smile. There is no universal way to imitate pain. The average person cannot stomach bringing misery to the undeserving. Pain is only visible through honesty because humans are vulnerable to the reflection of their own vulnerabilities. They are blind to the suffering of others. Regardless of a person's level of innocence or morality, those who are not them do not truly seem human. Others only seem worthy of disdain or sympathy. It is better to tap into the sympathetic side of the enemy's people than to garner their scorn. To residents of the empire, if what can happen to prey can happen to them, it matters. If there is no predictable circumstance that can put them in the position of prey, it is very unlikely they will care. If they believe there is no way it can happen to them, they cannot see an outsider's pain. They do not understand how others put themselves in the situations that bring them devastation. They are unmotivated to even pay attention to the turmoil the empire brings upon its prey. The empire's enemies must be shown that they are as weak as its prey, that it is the only way they can see the reality of their situation and honestly reflect upon their predicament. The average person is taught right and wrong and cannot ignore their heart and mind. They have not been conditioned to enjoy the squeals of the helpless like the empire. They have not suffered the deserved retribution resulting from the empire's transgressions to be able to justify targeting civilians and torturing prisoners of war. Being average, the citizen knows they are never truly safe from evil, domestic or foreign. True evil does not discriminate when it has the advantage. Those who live under the empire have good reason to fear the motion of its pendulum. They know the safety of others is connected to their safety. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Nothing is guaranteed. Simply because an empire is powerful today, there is no assurance it will remain so in everyone's lifetime. Convincing the people of this reality can create allies out of supposed enemies. Striking at the hearts of its citizens can force the enemy to pull back. Once their hearts are reached, they will not be satisfied with their government's immoral behavior. Those who already have grievances with the government will be motivated to amplify their voices and spread dissension. Once they are seduced by the cause, allies on the other side will want to do more than talk. They will want to act. They will vote against the war if given the opportunity. They will protest against the war if the government mutes their voices. They will sabotage the war efforts if the government strikes them down in the streets. They will betray their own country and provide direct support to the cause if they are criminalized for their opposition to the war. Winning the hearts of the enemy's citizens can create more than a marriage of convenience. It can create an eternal bond strong enough to disarm, disable, and destroy its military campaign. Chapter 9. Persuasion. Convincing the enemy that the hundreds of men seeking their death are in the thousands promotes the development of a superiority complex within its ranks. The appearance of many corpses on their end can influence the enemy's perception. Possessing skilled men, advanced technology, or the strategic advantage that allows for eradicating a large force with little or limited manpower can greatly aid in deception. If each man or resource is capable of eliminating 5 men, a mere squad can make large platoons and companies tremble at the whisper of their deployment. The disappearance of many capable men can amplify the apparent size of a group. It can expand the size of their hand. The targets may find it impossible for a small group to capture massive amounts of humans. However, it only takes one properly aimed rifle at the right time to subdue a gathering. A perfectly planned kidnapping can subdue even the mightiest of able-bodied men. Successful attacks on many locations in a short time frame can even make one man seem like a battalion. The use of explosives and other weapons or technology capable of downing structures and several men does not require multiple hands. The only things mandatory are strategic competency and the tactical dexterity to augment one's presence and sabotage discernment. Though numbers do not lie, terror can lead to miscalculations. Rumors and fake news can lead an enemy to miscount the opposition. Sometimes there is not enough time to question information and it must be respected, even if there is a strong possibility it is inaccurate. Sometimes doubt is too risky. Failure to acknowledge a clear risk can lead to the slaughter of thousands. In these situations, a group can increase their numbers in the minds of their opponent with well-placed myths, tales, gossip, and stories regarding the size of their forces. Outside help can make it seem like a small group has massive forces. Assistance in the form of weapons, strategy, and people can deceive the enemy if such assistance is not publicized. The destruction of cities previously deemed untouchable, the routing of troops previously viewed as invincible, and the swarming upon locations that were thought to be well fortified are all events that can make a force rethink numerical assumptions. Being unsure about the enemy one is facing creates great paranoia. If the numbers on the other side are unknown or inaccurate, no confidence can truly be placed in offensive or defensive measures. There may not be enough bullets to survive firefights. There may not be enough shells to move forward on a position. Missed opportunities can accrue and lead to the realization of heavy losses. Uncertainty regarding the numbers that surround one's forces develops mistrust. A foreign nation is a maze to the young invader. He does not know what lurks behind each corner, behind each wall. When men are taken or killed, it diminishes the command's ability to easily throw men on the battlefield. Little by little, with each unexpected tragedy, distrust of the leadership grows. When boxed in by an unverifiable number of predators, the average soldier will fear for their individual life. They will weigh the importance of their life against the importance of the mission. They will reflect on those who sent them to war and those who command them to fight. They will question how valued their lives are to the system if it cannot even provide an accurate forecast of the battlefield conditions. Distrust in leadership leads to a breakdown in teamwork. If leaders cannot be trusted, the incentive to work for the good of the group can be eroded. Though units with more established bonds may be able to remain cohesive and perhaps even push forward despite their disconnection with the brass, most teams need inspiration and guidance from the top to retain the motivation necessary to put themselves at risk to defend their nation. Without the indispensable basic respect between commanders and their troops, no battle plan can be trusted. Psychological defense mechanisms blind fighters and cause them to swing at each other. A man's natural inclination to either fight or flee when under intense stress reveals itself when they find themselves in an unwinnable situation. Not knowing who one's enemies are, not knowing how many enemies surround them, and distrusting the war machine itself activates this sense of self-preservation. If properly brainwashed through training, a soldier can rediscover his purpose when lost. But if a semblance of humanity remains within him, the inconsistencies between training and reality may be too much to overcome. It is not in men to willingly present themselves to be crash dummies. No mentally sane man would view being thrown into a human meat grinder simply to discern an enemy's strengths as honorable. Most men put their life on the line in war because they value their lives. They value their lives in their country as well as the lives of their countrymen. They dream of sacrificing themselves for the good of the nation, not for the incompetence of their leaders. If men believe little consideration is taken for their lives in strategy, they will not want to charge into the enemy head first. Men go to war to give meaning to the lives, not to die in battlefield experiments or to verify the validity of their leadership's hypothesis. Those foolish or indoctrinated enough to remain loyal to a futile or uncertain cause are disgusted by those who question the mission. They view them as weak for not following others without question. They regard their doubts as betrayal and treason. They are disgusted by their existence and may even start to view them with the same disdain reserved for the enemy. Men on both sides of the loyalty debate may find themselves dreaming of escaping the battlefield for home. If leadership cannot be trusted, blindly going to battle is foolish. If fellow soldiers cannot be trusted to follow orders, there is no reason to assume they will protect your six. Though every man fantasizes about the day he returns home, dissension motivates men to take recreant actions to speed up the process. When a soldier surrenders to threats or attacks to his mind, he will undermine leadership as if he were directly corrupted by the enemy. They will become obstacles to his survival. He will become a virus that will have to be removed before incubation is completed. Such a condition spreads. If left without remedy, the usefulness of all within its range is affected. The inflicted will hold back effort. They will not be the best they can be. They will hold their fire to avoid revealing their positions. They will refuse to fight when it's personally more convenient to hide. They will take pride in cowardice and refuse to take the initiative to achieve objectives. The presence of this sickness among military men will literally drive them to swing at each other. Physical fights over minor disagreements become common. when mistrust of the system is prevalent and distrust of superiors is communal. Some will use desertion as payback. When taken for granted, they will determine the price for their allegiance. They will realize that their participation in war is necessary for the war itself to exist. They will walk away from their posts to spite those who dared deceive them and carefully use them as pawns. Mutiny against leadership becomes widespread when the unappreciated, the unmotivated, and the ungrateful all come to their senses simultaneously. The unappreciated do as they please because they no longer fear the consequences of disobedience. The unmotivated become so after witnessing the leadership's inability to strike fear in the hearts of the problematic. The ungrateful capitalize on the attitude of the apathetic to justify their lethargy. A union of disgruntled soldiers in its ranks is as damaging to a military's campaign as a weapon of mass destruction. It is rare that the guerrilla needs or desires to manipulate his brothers and sisters in arms. The empire presents a good enough reason to fight. Guerrillas do not require much persuasion to fight. Their existence alone lets them know they are at a disadvantage. There is no need to lie about the threat they face. Everyone can see it. The empire wants them all dead, no matter what it says. It wouldn't wage war against them just to spare them. Only a fool or a coward would allow themselves to be saved by the empire and put on display as a prop or token. The hunted are all on the run, like fugitives, downplaying the threat to their lives as self-sabotage. Propaganda may be useful to deceive the outside world for specific purposes. It adds nothing of strategic value to deceive the masses, unless such activity is done to send men off aimlessly to feed the empire the corpses of its men. It is counterproductive for the guerrilla to lie to themselves. The truth about their situation must be known throughout the ranks. Civilians must know of the threat they face. Though manpower is limited, and devastating news can cause the cowardly to flee the front lines, it is better to have a few brave men who know they will die for the cause than to have thousands of spineless recruits who were deceived into joining the cause. Deception can lead to betrayal, and betrayal can lead to the death of everyone. There is no guarantee that the empire will spare traitors. Honesty is the best way to determine if men can be trusted. If a man is told he may die tomorrow and he still arrives the next day, he is more trustworthy than the man who needs lies to show up. The guerrilla does not require lies to get them to fight, because they only have one true home, one true nation. They feel obligated to defend it, especially if they have no other home or face discrimination, hatred, or poverty abroad. Pawns need all of the lies and excuses in the world to justify their meaningless behavior. Guerrillas have no choice but to fight for victory. Chapter 10. Preparation. To prepare for war, the guerrilla approaches situations where they have to fight. The guerrilla must prepare their mind, body, and soul for war. They must practice facing assaults and obstacles of all forms. Though the empire can be stagnant in its overall approach, it always possesses the capability to target its prey using various methods. For example, though the empire may only be able to direct fire in a straight line, it has the option to open fire from land, air, and sea. It adds even more variability to its methods by attacking on multiple fronts, either unpredictably or simultaneously. The guerrilla must be trained to physically resist the empire by all means possible. All men should be trained in hand-to-hand combat. They should be strong enough to fight off one or more attackers. Their bodies should be hardened to endure strikes and torture. They should know how to tend to wounds and injuries. They should be physically fit to travel quickly for miles on foot. In theory, a weapon should be viewed as a primary source of self-defense, but the body should be capable of serving as a strong substitute. The mind must be prepared for war as well. If a fighter doesn't possess a mind, he is as impactful as an empty shell thrown at the enemy. He must be able to endure the propaganda of the enemy. When they send threats, he must be able to acknowledge them without giving way to fear. When they tell lies, he must be able to discern fact from fiction. He must not allow them to enter his mind. If they gain access to his mind, they can control him. Morale is fueled by the spirit. The spirit is the coordination of the heart and the mind. The empire intends for every victory on its end to weaken the heart of the guerrilla. It wants every life it takes to weaken the resolve of its prey. But the spirit must be kept strong for men to want to hold the line. Whether through religion, politics, or a desire for vengeance, the spirit of the guerrilla must be inspired or nobly maneuvered to stay in the fight. The guerrilla cannot depend on the world to guarantee their security. Allies cannot be trusted to put their own interests on the line to protect them. Nations will always act in their best interest, regardless of how compassionate they seem. They will desert their allies in their time of need if providing assistance would lead to their destruction as well. They will drag their feet as foreigners die daily because it doesn't directly affect them. The guerrilla must prepare in all directions with every resource available to ensure it is not caught off guard by the insecure and unsatisfied predators of the world. Dependence on the sanity of an empire is not a wise survival technique. The guerrilla must always assume that the leadership of the empire can suddenly and unexpectedly become unreasonable and launch an invasion, even if it is to its own detriment. Neutral parties cannot be trusted to support the cause against the oppressor. The choice of being unaligned shows a lack of consideration for the victims of the oppressor. Those who do not speak against wrongdoing but rather sit back and witness it are no different than those who justify the wrongdoing. Their impact is the same. Therefore, the guerrilla must be prepared to defend their lands without help. Each fighter must be ready to ward off multiple attackers for the entirety of the empire's assault. They cannot place faith in believing they will survive the entire war without injury. They must expect to be disabled or disfigured on the battlefield, and they must know that they can count on no one else but each other to pick up their wounded and their dead. Since no nation will put a foreigner's interest above their own, the guerrilla must always think for themselves. They must not allow themselves to be manipulated by an ally. Though they may provide assistance, perhaps even enough to avoid heavy casualties and push the empire back, they will require payment for their contributions. The people must never allow themselves to be fooled into becoming a proxy for outsiders. The mental toughness to stand alone in the face of annihilation should be ingrained in the people to retain the nation's sovereignty and independence. With their minds barricaded, they should be able to possess the means to feed their own spirit. They must be able to motivate their people to fight against the enemy on their own. They must be strong enough to resist being purchased by a friend or foe. They must be hopeful enough to carry on the war for as long as the empire chooses to remain on their land and in their affairs. The guerrilla must take pride in who they are, as no other nation can be trusted to be the driving force of their cause. In times of peace, enemies are sought that can be used for target practice. Peace is a subjective term. In the world of men, there is no peace. The potential for war is always present. Every day is just another step towards confrontation. The mere fact that enemies exist means there is no peace. Even when they aren't attacking, they cannot be allowed to operate without observation. When enemies speak of peace, it must be assumed they are preparing to attack. The guerrilla must act in accordance. As they try to distract the world with beautiful speeches, artillery should be manufactured, maneuvered, and maintained. Even if it can be verified that those who speak of peace have no intention for war, the mere fact that they are capable of war should cause potential targets to improve and maintain their defenses. Governments of the world are fickle. A friend today could have dreams of conquest tomorrow. Faith should never be placed in security guarantees. Faith should only be placed in one's ability to wage war thoroughly. The world, at times, can seem so progressive that the absence of declared enemies may fool a nation into believing they have no enemies. A simple survey of the capabilities and objectives of a nation can determine if there is a potential for conflict, even if diplomats on both sides shower each other with hugs and kisses. Numbers do not lie. Those in the lead will always want more, and those who fall behind will always want to catch up. And they are all willing to throw the lives of young men away to achieve their goals. After victory is achieved, Defensives must be constantly strengthened and sharpened. There is no time to imagine a world that will never exist, a world of peace. A victory simply means there is time to improve, time to get better. In war, success doesn't buy peace, it buys time. Every confrontation presents an opportunity to learn. When there is no war, the enemy must be found in different realms and sparred against to prepare the people for the inevitable day of war. This is necessary because most of the time, the empire chooses the battlefield. It has the resources to attack its prey anywhere. The empire can use bombs, words, or coins to achieve its aims. The people must be ready to meet the enemy in the domain of its choice. The physical realm is usually where the empire chooses to confront its prey. The most direct way is the battlefield. However, it can choose to beat down its prey by other means. To prove a point regarding its superiority, the empire can use athletic competitions to validate its superiority. Though the stakes of such battles do not compare to those on the battlefield, they are used to boost morale throughout the empire and justify why its prey should be subjugated in all walks of life. To some, the physically inferior have no business contending against superior men. If they are beaten in games for children, some believe they should surrender in the world of men. The guerrilla should strive to be victorious in these sorts of competitions. It provides the opportunity to learn the physical habits, differences, and limitations of their foes, information that could be useful in confrontations on the battlefield. The realm of the mind is never safe from the empire's raids. The people must be aware of the sort of manipulations it puts into play to deceive and weaken the people. Anything that is conceived within the empire should never be trusted. It is highly likely that whatever is produced by the empire for the people is laced with some sort of poison. To accept any form of education or curriculum produced by the empire specifically for its prey is foolish. To accept any media in general from the empire is foolish. Whether it be news or entertainment, it must be assumed that there are hidden agendas inserted and delivered to subconsciously destabilize the people. However, the point is not to ignore the empire's attempts at manipulation, but to be aware of its tactics and to learn how to spot them and never swallow propaganda wholly. In the spiritual realm, the empire seeks to extract sadness, anger, and frustration from its opponent. It wants the people to be upset and helpless because such feelings are worthless on the battlefield. So, it puts out information to depict the cause as pointless. It shows images of destroyed cities, images of prisoners of war. It spreads news of its success on the battlefield and its enemies' failures to repel its forces. Such attacks must be faced head-on. The people must learn to smile in the face of death, though they should not cover their eyes and ears to avoid feeling the reality of their situation. They should learn from the empire's efforts. The fact that the empire even has to put effort into affecting their hearts is proof that there is room to be victorious. If the empire could defeat them easily, it would simply just do so. Its constant use of propaganda is proof it is not invincible. Surrender is not used to admit defeat. Giving up is a strategic move. It can put the enemy to sleep and present an ideal situation. Sometimes retreating is the only way to resist. Sometimes it is the only way to regroup. Sometimes it is the only way to rebuild. Sometimes it is the only way to set up a response. Surrendering always feels like giving up. It always feels like admitting weakness, bowing down, cowardice. But it must be viewed as just another strategy. It must be viewed as a way to deceive the enemy. The guerrilla must never allow themselves to be defined by outsiders, especially those who do not have to face the empire. The end game is always the most important aspect in war. A retreat today could lead to a rout tomorrow. Chapter 11. Secrecy. The survival of their movement depends on secrecy and stealth. Secrecy is hiding one's plans. Knowing the future can mean the difference between life and death, victory or defeat. Boasting of one's plans can be a sign of weakness. To be uneducated in the effect telegraphing one's moves has on the enemy is the epitome of overconfidence and blindness. Those without impaired vision understand that plans should be buried as if they exist only in caskets. The enemy should never know what truly lies in the hearts of leadership and men on the ground. Knowing one's feelings is similar to knowing one's plans. Knowing how they will react determines what they should face. Analyzing how they react determines what changes to make. If plans and feelings cannot be directly determined, discovering strengths by any means provides advantages. Knowing strengths can determine which targets to avoid and which targets to sabotage. Knowing strengths can determine if reinforcements should be deployed or if more deadly weaponry should be employed. The Empire cannot know their position. Its reach is too long. The Empire has the resources and connections to expose plans. Its previous victories have resulted in its presence around the globe. It has embedded itself in every society during times of peace and as an aftermath of wars. It can buy people either directly or in exchange for favors. It has walking eyes and ears hidden in the shadows of every nation. It possesses power akin to a telepath in the midst of those accustomed to speaking their minds. Those who wear their hearts on their sleeves spill the beans with ease. Its resources provided with the means to provoke responses. Through actions or words, the Empire prods its enemies and then analyzes their reactions to perfect its strategic policy. The Empire can sacrifice men and weapons to determine its opponent's strengths. If it doesn't want to use its own resources, it can borrow the resources of allies. It can send spies to authenticate rumors. It can send birds to map entire territories. Those who refuse to hide their strengths from its view risk losing their advantages. Weaknesses can be exposed in the same manner strengths are revealed. But in the case of discovering an enemy's weakness, the Empire does not face heavy losses. If its forces are sent to test an unbreakable line and it easily collapses, the value of the men previously counted as expendable increases. There is always a high bounty on their plans. Outsiders with eyes inside of the enemy's camp are valuable, whether they be perfectly aligned or neutral. Their usefulness is irreplaceable. If they can provide assistance, they can change their living situations from shacks to mansions. It is nothing to provide the lifestyle of a prosperous citizen to an excellent scout. They save lives and ammunition. Moles are more precious than external spies. Their payment is usually higher. They are either members of the cause, fighters, civilians, or witnesses. They either know the plan intricately, have been alerted for their safety, or just happen to come across crucial information. Regardless of how the information is gained, payment is due when it is disseminated. No bulletin needs to be posted. It is simply the way business is done. Secrets discovered or extracted are worthy of reward or promotion. Subordinates gain privileges and praise for intel. Commanders gain opportunities to advance their careers. The media rarely seeks or needs monetary rewards for their distribution of information. Unless infiltrated, the media disseminates intelligence without regard to its beneficiaries. At times, the Empire only needs to turn on a screen or audio player to learn its enemy's position. Though it does not pay them for their services directly, the Empire can take actions to ensure media entities are elevated in the journalism industry. Any person or entity that reveals an organization's secrets indirectly serves their adversaries, if done unintentionally. When every man's life depends on the plan, there are no informers. For the guerrilla, their survival depends on cooperative self-defense. They are surrounded. The Empire comes from all sides. A man only has 2 eyes and 1 face. They can't see behind themselves. It is common knowledge that 2 heads are better than 1. It is better to join forces than to be a lone wolf, when it's possible. It is better to be able to focus on one position than to frantically try to cover all angles of the clock. Their survival depends on the cooperative use of limited resources, weapons, supplies, and time. Short of manpower, collaboration is the only option. The Empire can send in reinforcements. The guerrilla fights the same war until it is over. Weapons cannot go to waste simply because operators are no longer in service. Fighting alongside brothers ensures their rifles continue the fight in the event of their demise. Their survival depends on united support from civilians. A divided guerrilla force is fueled by a divided people. If the resources of the land are diverse, each army will lack the proper essentials for war. Guerrillas must hang together, otherwise they will be hung together. They have all plotted to commit crimes against the Empire. They have all shaped their minds to sabotage its war machine whenever given the chance. They have all plotted to reduce the Empire's manpower through murder. The cause completely exists to destabilize the Empire by any means. They will all be labeled war criminals if the Empire succeeds. Their only option is to unify publicly and behind the scenes to ensure their freedom. Chapter 12. Stealth. No witnesses are left for the enemy to question. A secret is something not understood or known. Stealth is acting in a clandestine manner, or in such a way that actions are unnoticed or difficult to detect by others. It is impossible to see an unrevealed secret, whereas one who moves with stealth is exposed. Skill depends on if they are seen. They can only be identified if seen. Through direct planning, guerrillas ensure that no witnesses interfere in their plots. A target is isolated. An abandoned location is chosen. Witnesses disappear at the arrival of threats. If they value their lives, they lose their memory. They question their vision. They become unsure of their hearing. A viable threat can clear the scene of a planned murder. Warnings from legitimate butchers can clear the field of sheep. For those easily moved by the material world, a few coins can ensure their silence. The acceptance of payment makes them complicit in the crime. Because they are motivated by gain, the potential loss of their life must still be emphasized to guarantee their cooperation. If they cannot be silenced immediately, their detention can be used to blind them. Once the necessary deeds are done, they are released. This tactic is usually reserved for fellow citizens and the truly innocent. When there is no need to harm a person, their life can be spared. At times, holding a person for a short period of time is not sufficient enough. They may need to be entirely relocated to guarantee their silence and spare their life. Killing witnesses is a last resort. When all other measures are taken or considered, and there is no other option, they must die if their eyes will prevent the successful completion of the mission. Taking the life of an innocent must be deeply contemplated. The guerrilla fights against the demonic forces of the Empire to save the people. They do not fight to become aligned with evil. If a witness must be killed, amends must be made after victory is gained. If justice is called for, the responsible parties must surrender and face the judgment of the people after victory is gained. Storing plans within one's memory is preferable to documentation. Anything on paper can be physically copied. Anything digital can be hacked. Anything audio can be recorded. Anything visual can be filmed. Anything that can be grasped can be captured. Knowing is better than memorizing. At bare minimum, memorizing requires the mindless storing of information in one's brain. If misunderstood, the information becomes meaningless. If forgotten, it is forever lost. Knowing is understanding to the point where one can paraphrase. With only a few clues, information can be discovered, if forgotten, because it is known when clearly understood. Knowing comes from repetition. Repetition in the sense of interacting with information repeatedly, not simply actively trying to memorize information through excessive effort. Though much speed comes from the use of written communication, hearing voices in person is preferable. Letters can get lost in transit or captured by unintended readers. Because they are graspable, they can be removed from messengers with the right force. Messages transmitted digitally can be hacked or intercepted. This sort of correspondence is more dangerous than physical letters, as stolen messages can be rapidly spread to millions. Regardless of their format, messages in the wrong hands can easily be forged or falsified. Their manipulation can seem like truth as they closely match those created by the assumed senders. Their authenticity remains questionable, regardless of denials and explanations. Face-to-face communication ensures the intended receiver of a message is verified. Their mannerisms can be observed for signs of distress or deception. Additionally, information can be added or received privately in real time. Plans can be completely changed due to necessity or to contradict other communications to deceive the enemy. It is not uncommon for guerrillas to create their own language. Language is not simply just speech of the tongue. There are many ways to talk. Man can speak in code in various ways. The use of modern machinery or advanced technology can create languages that only specialists understand. Speaking in code is a tactic that any man can achieve if those within his circle understands what he means. Written code is similar. As long as what is being communicated is understood by those communicated to, scribbles and gibberish can be deemed legitimate languages. Body language itself is an accurate way to understand others and to be understood. Through experience, one can understand others' thoughts through their physical movements. Through agreement, movements can be used to signal appropriate responses. They are skilled mind readers and meteorologists. To read the mind of the enemy, all possible offensive maneuvers must be considered. The enemy is observed and teased. It is pushed and pulled to analyze its level of resistance. It is provoked and aggravated to examine its responses. Information is planted to observe responses. Activity is choreographed for the same purposes. Environments are read by visualizing all possible scenarios that have occurred and that could occur. The environment is observed and tested. Questions are asked to determine how to move properly. What causes defenders to react? What draws a crowd? What behavior raises suspicion? Gossip and misinformation campaigns are used to monitor their effects on surroundings. Reactions are observed to aid strategic planning. Reactions themselves are inserted within environments to create layers of deception within strategy. Eye contact between guerrillas is worth more than dialogue between pawns. Guerrillas interact telepathically with one another when their training, goals, and ideas are aligned. They do not need uniforms to identify each other. They barely need speech to recognize each other. They know who their friends and enemies are on sight. They can spot a target quicker than a target can spot them. They know who their people are. They know their neighbors, their countrymen, their allies. Pawns are trained to act. Guerrillas know how to act. Chapter 13. Tolerance. A closed mouth receives the same treatment as an open mouth. When compromised, a swift return cannot be made. It does not matter if the situation is the result of training error, direct failure, unforeseen circumstances, or betrayal. When under control of the enemy, there is no opportunity for a speedy homecoming. When a member of the cause is captured, they cannot be immediately trusted, even when released. They must be viewed with suspicion, as the Empire cannot be trusted to spare anyone. When they happen to spare a tried and true member of the cause, it must be initially assumed that the act was done to serve its interests somehow. Though one may remain loyal and refuse to supply information, the cause cannot rely on man. The fragility of man, the greed of man, are aspects of human nature that can always be manipulated, directly or indirectly, with or without one's knowledge. Therefore, Even men who can remain silent under the greatest of pressures must be viewed with suspicion after falling into the hands of the enemy. Though they can be trusted by the men of the cause, there must be a system put in place that thoroughly scrutinizes their ability to remain a part of the cause if they are returned after capture. The system must be objective and without feeling, as the enemy depends on the emotions of brothers and sisters in arms to infiltrate the movement. Surely, signs of torture will be evident on those who refuse to speak while in captivity. These signs may be physical or psychological. Though physical signs seem more trustworthy, such marks can be forged or allowed to occur for authenticity depending on the level of commitment to betrayal. The most likely consequence for remaining silent behind enemy lines is death. Though execution can occur even when information is given, it is often assumed that a prisoner of war who was killed remained loyal to the cause. However, that is not necessarily always the case. The execution could be a ruse employed by the enemy to give the appearance that no useful information was obtained. Any guerrilla that falls into the hands of the enemy deserves and welcomes a painful death. Torture should be expected because the enemy can't be trusted. Even if it never comes, it is better to be prepared for it. Though peace of mind is soothing, to be unexpectedly tormented proliferates the intensity of the experience. The enemy is evil. It should be expected to act accordingly. Granting the Empire the element of surprise only adds to the effectiveness of its strategies. The guerrilla must be of the mind that no surrendered information guarantees their safety. Betrayal does not guarantee their freedom. They should be of the mind that the enemy is filled with nothing but hatred and wants nothing but the destruction of the cause. They aim to kill the people no matter what. Submission offers no sanctuary. Surrender offers no peace. Being spared from torture brings no joy. A gruesome death is viewed as heroism by the true guerrilla. Victory is achieved when one cannot be broken by the enemy. The cause remains protected when one refuses to provide confessions or intel to the enemy. Secrets are kept through the use of misdirection, smoke and mirrors, and false flags. Honesty is natural. It is easy to see the truth in most things because the average man cannot help himself. He must show you what he is and what he is capable of. Pride is natural. Even the dishonest find it difficult to keep secrets. They just cannot contain themselves. They must unleash their light or darkness upon the world. Distrust is natural. Those with the wisdom or experience to understand the world find it difficult to trust on first sight. Their inclination to analyze everything can put them at a disadvantage if what they will seek is known before it is sought after. The guerrilla must be comfortable being a complete liar. The Empire must be deceived on every front. Appearances must be manipulated to influence its decisions. Thoughts and beliefs must be manufactured to make the enemy question its assumptions. Morale must be advertised as exceptional to motivate the people and dishearten pawns. Bold lies must be delivered with tact and without shame to win over the support of allies. Perverting the plans of the enemy can cause it to waste resources. Moving its forces to assault empty strongholds makes the Empire vulnerable to attack. Patience is necessary to make the enemy move or remain still. Patience is refusing to act, even when it makes you look weak. Patience is refusing to act, even when it makes you look foolish. Patience is refusing to act, even when you are strong. Patience is refusing to act, even when you are intelligent. Misdirection prolongs its military campaign and opens the Empire up for criticism from its citizens. Those who know the plan must be able to tolerate being misunderstood by those who cannot know the truth. Everyone must be misdirected, not just the Empire. Not everyone can be trusted. Even those whose lives depend on the cause may reveal information. To protect them, the true aims of the cause can be concealed while digestible ambitions are presented to the public. However, Lying to the people for a long period of time can lead to backlash. Carrying out attacks behind smoke screens helps avoid heavy artillery. Men on all sides must be made fools. Only those who need to know the truth should know the truth. Those left in the dark may react with anger. They must be appeased when possible, but their feelings are never above the mission. Acting under suitable cover may cause the loss of support from those who cannot commit to the cause without seeing every detail. Their lack of vision may even lead them to become enemies of the movement. However, it is better to protect the cause than to risk its destruction to satisfy the curiosity of a few. The people can always be appeased in the end with victory. Material goods and booty from war can easily silence the majority of those unsatisfied with the methods used to obtain such prizes. Other forms of war trophies can appease those with more nationalistic views. Captured and executed enemies also never fail to sway certain disgruntled members of the crowd after all lies are said and done. The foolish go against tanks with rocks. The skilled deflect bullets with swords. Sometimes it is necessary to tolerate being seen as weak to make wise decisions. Ingenuity, patience, humility, and open-mindedness can turn most weaknesses into strengths. Chapter 14. Invisibility. Distractions are used to flank enemies and hit them from behind. Man has no choice but to surrender to his senses. It is what makes him human, awareness of himself and his surroundings. He cannot ignore the threat of injury or death, even if he knows in his heart it is fictitious. He must carry on with the play, even if the role be his last. He must pay at least a modicum of respect to distractions and ploys of the physical world. Politics can influence behavior on the battlefield in a way that captures the attention of the most disciplined soldier. They can easily be navigated away from their mission with the insertion of political rhetoric anywhere their eyes and ears can reach. They can even be turned against their fellow soldiers if disagreements regarding lifestyle choices can be exploited. Though political distractions can penetrate most minds, it may take other psychological means to get others to lose focus. There are general things in life that every man fears: poverty, death, injury, illness, losing a loved one, failure. There are also specific phobias that exist in individual men that can be used to consume their attention. Their goal is to take their mind out of the fight. Knowing their mind is the first step to capturing their thoughts and manipulating them for purposes contrary to their mission. The fear of poverty can not only distract the individual man on the ground, it can also influence the decisions of officers and leaders. If they are made to believe an offensive would lead to bankruptcy, they will have to reassess their objectives. This moment of doubt presents an opening for the opposition. While they recalculate, they can be fired upon by the dyscalculic. While they perform audits, they can be murdered by the penniless. Though some may deem men of faith foolish, to ignore the potential of such a soft flank would itself be imprudent. If they look to gods for guidance, one must only disguise himself as a deity to drive them off the road. If they trust signs for direction, those can easily be manufactured by the guileful. The effectiveness of a false flag is dependent upon how well its participants can keep their mouths shut. Silence is deadly. The dead are silent. Silence can make a man invisible. A man of little to no words does not exist in a room full of loud mouths. He can watch, wait, plan, and scheme right in their presence. They are blind, disabled. They cannot see him coming, though he stands before them. If they somehow spot him, they will not know him. They will speak to provoke his tongue or just to fill the void. They will spill secrets to get him to talk, all to no avail. Even when the man of silence speaks, there is nothing of substance given to the enemy. Silence kills when combined with the element of surprise. It forces the enemy to act and expose themselves. It forces the enemy to act before it is ready. Silence can lead to the deaths of thousands when positions can only be revealed by the screams of the ensnared. Silence can induce the enemy to sabotage itself. Every action is carried out with stealth. If the enemy can follow their trail, they halt all movement. If the enemy can follow their scent, they ambush them. When it prods and pokes, the Empire expects a response. It expects resistance in some form. It expects a response for its assault on civilians. It waits for intelligence regarding retaliatory strikes. It searches for paths that may be used for escape. It seeks out havens used by its enemy to conspire. When there is no movement, there is nothing for it to attack, to spy on, make use of, or strategize against. One becomes invisible simply by remaining still or refusing to react. If one cannot disappear in the face of an enclosing enemy, they must immediately change to an offensive stance. If disappearance is not a possibility, it is only a matter of time before locations are discovered. It is only a matter of time before men and weapons are detected and targeted. Once one becomes a blip on the radar, only a hellish storm of firepower should be expected from the enemy, at the very least. If it is possible to return fire on the enemy when under its sights, one cannot hold back. Everything and anything must be thrown at the enemy to create an opportunity to escape. If survival is unlikely, large-scale murder-suicide is the only option. No footprints are left in the sand. Direct planning and habit ensure no evidence is left behind when secrecy and stealth is essential. Direct planning takes into account the sort of evidence that could be left behind after the completion of a mission. It ensures no traces are left behind through the conception of concrete step-by-step plans. Though the aim of guerrilla warfare is decentralized activity on the strategic level, the tactical level may require centralization and a small degree of micromanagement to ensure fingerprints and footprints are not captured by the enemy. Though some decentralization exists when direct planning includes contingency plans, those on the ground are free to implement such plans in respect to the changing conditions of the battlefield. The habit of never leaving evidence behind usually comes from training. Those who train for perfection, those who can work with others as a team, those who can participate in useful groupthink, all have the ability to move like ghosts against the enemy. The bodies of enemies are dropped on invisible featherbeds. Responsibility for attacks on the enemy are hidden or kept a mystery for political reasons and to safeguard one's position, methods, arsenal, supply, and headcount. Though the conflict can escalate at the whim of the Empire, if it lacks the standing to act with unchecked brutality, acting in silence and without being seen can eat away at its dominance. Chapter 15. Tact. Weapons are chosen by their decibel. When the aim is to cause confusion, deafening arms are excellent. When the mission depends on silence, suppressed weapons lead to success. The aim is to cause confusion when the Empire's troops have the upper hand in battle. It must be made to disperse when its forces are concentrated against its prey. When they come to attack, they must be broken apart. Physically dissecting its forces creates the space for kill shots. The type of weapons used to make the Empire move are only as important as its agenda, whether that be on the battlefield or in the space of public opinion. When the Empire's manipulative tactics have a hold on the masses, those who act with too much honesty are villainized by those under its spell. If its allure cannot be directly shattered, it must be affected in a manner that at least makes it seem questionable. When allies are needed, when support is needed, those who may look with apathy upon the cause may only be moved by forgery. If the narratives presented by the Empire cannot be completely destroyed, alternative accounts must linger to cause disorder and prevent lies from becoming concrete facts. This is the same on the battlefield. If the approach of the enemy cannot be stopped, diversion can stall the inevitable. Recklessness can force a reassessment of the situation. A mixture of the two is the epitome of confusion. Silence can be used to encourage the empire's men to congregate. When out of sight and out of ear's reach, there seems to be no reason to fear the guerrilla. Noise puts them on alert. It immediately puts them on guard and creates safe distances between them. In guerrilla warfare, it is better to get two heads for the price of one. Stillness grants the enemy false moments of repose, more than enough time for tanks and soldiers to meet their ends through flanking maneuvers and surprise attacks. Sometimes it is necessary to remain silent in regards to the empire's propaganda. Revealing opinions and opposition may be used as targeting tools. If it does not know who to hit, it does not know where to hit, and vice versa. If rumors serve to benefit the cause, leaving inaccurate information unchecked is a sound tactic, so long as the movement can successfully feed the lies. Stealth inspires great fear. Because most men are reckless in movement, walk, and talk, the covert are feared and mythologized. They do not know what to expect when the opposition moves with stealth. They do not know if the savage demons of yarns will come in the form of men or literal monsters. They do not truly know what to expect from the enemy who moves surreptitiously. Their flanks are not safe from ambush. Their backs are not safe from betrayal. They do not know where to expect the furtive enemy. Though prepare they might, they have no way of faithfully knowing which direction bullets will come from. They have no way of knowing if the skies above their heads are truly invincible. They do not know when to expect the enemy who moves irrespective of time. The sun can hide men just as the dark skies of the night can conceal their presence. The moon can betray men just as a candle in the dark can expose faces. They do not know how to welcome the enemy who moves with stealth. A direct response may lead them into a trap. Ignoring warning signs could lead to an embarrassing rout. Because they are unpredictable, the enemy must continually change its strategies. Bureaucracies are not flexible and do not cater to independent thought. When confronted with a variable such as the guerrilla, they tend to move slowly. The bureaucratic nature of empires makes them big and slow. Everything must be approved, even the thoughts of men on the ground. The innovative men on their side are robbed of glory and victory as their voices are subdued by their own commanders. They march to their deaths, knowing they are carrying themselves in the wrong direction. Their leaders are so loyal to the system that they would rather die than disagree with it. Too much pride in the hands of power holders keeps stagnant bureaucracies alive. Even when they are inefficient, even when they know the problem stands before them in front of mirrors, they will never surrender the process. It is ingrained in them. The process itself is more important than victory. Bureaucracies do not respect ingenuity. They would rather die following the ways of old men than accept the need to diversify. Their loyalty to the system produces fear, failure, embarrassment, and defeat. Bureaucracies only allow one chance to win. The competence of leadership is never questioned as losses accrue, but ultimately, the administration is judged harshly when defeat is clear and undeniable. When the guillotine is prepared by the people for a fair accounting of all losses, commanders and rulers pay with their livelihood, their freedom, or their necks. They seek to hit an opponent's blind spot. Pawns live in a constant state of alertness, attempting to see what cannot be seen. When far away, pawns believe the guerrilla is within arm's reach. Pawns have blind spots because they fight for nothing. Though they are given reasons to go to war by the propagandists of their nation, their hearts have no reason to be in the fight. The disconnect between their hearts and minds creates blind spots. They do not know what to look for if they are not trained to look for it. They must be constantly on alert, under threat. Because they do not understand why they are fighting, they do not understand who they are fighting. They have been manipulated into blindness to serve the empire's purposes. They will not think outside of the realm provided by their masters. They cannot think for themselves. They only see what they are taught to see, whereas the guerrilla has to see reality as it is. to survive. Face to face with the guerrilla, a pawn thinks he still has time to prepare. Though they know not who they fight, they are overconfident. Though they know not what they fight, they are haughty. Though they know not where they fight, they are conceited. Though they know not when they fight, they are arrogant. Though they know not how they will fight, they are condescending. Though they know not why they fight, they are walking dead men. Chapter 16. Sheep. When an empire wages war on its prey, its own citizens are susceptible to retribution. Citizens can be classified as the individuals born within the empire as well as foreigners who willingly live under control of the empire. People born in the country are deemed the most valuable of all citizens to the empire. They are granted the most rights, and they are expected to make the most sacrifices to defend the homeland when no other cannon fodder is available. Natural-born citizens are still considered property of the state when they live abroad. The shadow of the empire protects them from bodily harm in places that fear its wrath. Foreigners who support the country in the country are usually considered citizens in a general sense, regardless of their ethnicity or nationality. Though they may not be granted the same rights as natural-born citizens, their submission to the state grants them mercy and privileges not afforded to those who claim neutrality or allegiance to another state. The empire also shows partiality towards foreigners who support the empire from abroad, though it is not simply out of appreciation for the support. Affinity can open doors, usually reserved for the boots of soldiers. All citizens are susceptible to retribution because no land is immune to direct strikes. All soil is weak, from sleeper cells to spies. There are always ways to get close to the empire's people, regardless of the consequences. Through the use of converts and infiltrators, a foe's citizens can be touched. However, this sort of activity can strengthen the hand of an empire. Converts are enemies of the state because they believe in the cause. They are the most beautiful development in war. They look like the enemy, walk like the enemy, and talk like the enemy, but they are friends of the movement. Dissidents are enemies of the state because they disagree with the ruling government or the state as a whole, even though they are citizens. They may or may not view the movement favorably. Their agenda is usually independent of outside influence. Dissidents aim to change the state of affairs within the empire for their benefit. Political rivals to the ruling regime differ from dissidents because they consider themselves as patriotic. While the dissidents want to upend the entire system, political rivals simply want to control it. They want to hold the reins. They believe the other side is unsuited to lead. They are unlikely to be convinced to turn against the empire. Nevertheless, their existence presents a costume for infiltrators and sabotagers to wear. Victims of the state's unfairness, oppression, and brutality can be used against the empire. They have more than enough reasons to commit treason. Criminals and others who only want personal gain can be turned against the empire if they lack patriotism. Simply because an individual chooses to live outside of the law or allows themselves to succumb to greed, it does not mean they can be turned against their nation. They may fear the heavy consequences for betrayal, or their patriotism may be one of the few things they hold dear. Infiltrators are guerrillas that come in the form of spies, sleeper cells, special forces, and other disguises. The Empire's citizens can be touched with direct hits on the Empire's soil. There's always a way to break through a wall. There's always a way to unlock a gate. There's always a way to break, deactivate, or destroy a missile defense system. Sleeper cells can be the best way to hit the Empire's citizens as they are already behind enemy lines. Regardless of how they arrived in the country, if they believe in the cause, if they are willing to die for the cause, they can show the Empire's citizens that they are not safe from the repercussions of its brutality. Regardless of the Empire's reach, if its enemy has nothing to lose, its citizens are not safe overseas. The invisible shield that surrounds them is meaningless to those who are willing to die for the cause. As long as they are in human form, they are not safe. Attacks on its citizens by the guerrilla can prove the Empire correct in its assertion that its prey is dangerous and needs to be destroyed without mercy. Once innocents are intentionally killed by confirmed members of the cause, the entire movement can be labeled as terrorism. Citizens agree to all sorts of tax increases when they believe their lives are in immediate danger. Empires may use false flags to garner this sort of support. Citizens are so easily scared because in their heart of hearts they know they are alone. The rhetoric from their governments and strongmen is never enough. Though they pretend to be invulnerable to attacks from the weak, they know all it takes is one bullet to prove the Empire wrong. They are always fearful of infiltration by inferior forces. They believe that outsiders have nothing to lose and everything to gain inside of the Empire. They view attacks by such individuals and groups as more dangerous than attacks by competitors because the latter at least has a capital that can be placed in jeopardy, whereas prey who come as infiltrators are typically formless. Even if they are captured or killed, more will come. It just takes one to burn down an entire community. Nevertheless, invasions from competitors are still feared. Even more so is the use of proxies by competitors to hit the Empire's soil and citizens. Though, as a proxy, backed by a competitor, the guerrilla can cleanly strike the Empire's citizens, it does not lessen the potential consequences for such an activity. The Empire capitalizes on its citizens' fears by amplifying threats. It makes the people need the government for protection. It makes the people believe its regime is the only one capable of protecting them. The Empire makes the people dependent on the government for personal power. Without the threat of its mighty forces and the backing of its economy, its citizens are like any other human on the planet. They are food in the hands of predators. Their connection to the Empire fools them into believing they are untouchable. They walk as giants on the earth, believing their nation's flag makes them bulletproof. The Empire makes its citizens comfortable to increase their anxiety in the face of threats. A savage man is more accepting of potentially harsh conditions. A pampered man trembles at the mere thought of losing a drop of blood. The more luxuries granted to the people by the Empire, the more likely they are to support its war machine without deep reflection. A change in the administration may end an invasion if it is driven completely by the personality of one man. One man can lead a people to war if the system under his control grants him the sole right to do so. One man can lead a people to war if the people allow him to. One man can lead a people to war if he overpowers the established order through military force, deception, or manipulation. One man can lead a people to war if he overpowers the people through the use of threats and force. When one man determines the fate of a nation, putting him out of service can put an end to war. His removal can change the system itself and prevent warmongering by his successors. The loss of a tyrant can cause the system to malfunction and even lead to its complete destruction. His assassination can force the people to change course if such an event is orchestrated internally. When the people want him gone, but they are too fearful to remove him themselves, his demise, if coordinated correctly or granted through fate, could be the catalyst they all crave to set themselves free. To boost morale, guerrillas may reveal their hand in an emperor's downfall. This may place them on the radars of other empires, even if their cause is just. Eliminating a tyrant can strengthen morale throughout the movement. When the cause of the people's heartache and pain can actually be touched by the people, the men at the front are inspired to be courageous. Civilians caught in the crossfire are given hope. It makes the potential for victory more realistic when the supposedly powerless prove they indeed have power. If the guerrilla can eliminate its oppressor's head of state, they can increase the faith of allies. Allies may be reluctant to provide weapons and supplies to a force that is only going to meet defeat and lose such investments to the enemy anyway. If they are resourceful enough to hit the emperor, there is no limit to what they can achieve with strong support from competitors. Such a feat can also sway neutral parties to show or provide support to the movement. No one wants to be left out of the party when the underdog takes down the bully. Removing its leader can also disrupt the empire's alliances, as no nation wants to be left standing next to the biggest failure in the world. Openly taking out the emperor could create more dangers and enemies for the guerrilla. It could make allies fearful of escalation if the empire is pushed to the point where competitors have to intervene. Mutually assured destruction always lingers behind talk of any potential confrontation between superpowers. In cases where the empire is simply slapping around its prey and is not fully engaged in the conflict, killing its head of state could put fighters and citizens in more danger. If the empire was actually holding back, its response to the move could be more devastating than imagined. The world could turn against the guerrilla if it accepts credit for the assassination of a world leader. It could cause the empire to gain support from competitors or other sovereign nations. War is a game where certain things are not done according to those in control of the game. Though a nation may support the cause, if unspoken agreements between nations are violated, such as presidents, kings, and other rulers being off limits, there will be a general prohibition on supporting the guerrilla openly. Using stealth to remove leaders eliminates an immediate threat and buys time to gain the best position on the battlefield. Avoiding responsibility helps avoid creating more problems. It causes confusion while answers are sought. If the guerrilla leaves no clue of their involvement, the empire has to focus its investigation on other external enemies, as well as internal suspects. The investigation could collapse unity within the empire, as blame may be falsely placed on political rivals and dissidents. During the confusion, the guerrilla can plan without fear of immediate retribution. While the empire is distracted, they could make moves on the ground to prepare counteroffensives and strengthen defensive positions. The guerrilla may be safe during the time of confusion. If it heavy-handedly strikes its prey in response for the loss of its leader, without evidence of their involvement in the crime, the empire may lose the support of staunch allies. The emperor represents the mind of the enemy. Its citizens represent its heart. Pawns represent its body. When the mind has control of the heart, the body doesn't fear pain. The sacrifices that must be made for victory are not feared. When the heart has control of the mind, the sacrifices that must be made for victory are not made without hesitation. The body is only placed in danger with caution, and for good reason. No movement is allowed that does not benefit the people. When the body has control of the heart, the mind is void of all reason. All that matters is what is beneficial to the flesh. When the mind is severed from the heart, the body fears pain. The sacrifices that must be made for victory are feared. When the heart is severed from the mind, the sacrifices that must be made for victory are not made. The body is not placed in danger even when victory is clear. Movement is not allowed, even if it benefits the people. When the body is severed from the heart, the mind is frantic and paranoid. The body is paralyzed, and the possibility of victory is not visible and seems impossible. This has been The Art of Guerrilla Warfare SE, The Guerrilla, written by J.J. Tucker, narrated by Drama Simpson. Copyright 2023 by SOG Books. Production copyright by SOG Books.